Good morning, folks. Let me tell you about the smartest person in my life. As you probably guessed, I'm talking about my son, Hunter, the magician. Sometimes he wanders into the Oval Office late at night and waves his magic wand around in the air a few times. Then he does a little spin and abracadabra, all of this wonderful magic powder appears on my desk. I then said out loud, "Holy smokes, all of that powder belongs up my nose, doesn't it?" Hunter then looked at me with a twinkle in his eye and smiled. He said, "It sure does, Papa. It sure does." So to make my son proud, I gave the magic powder a good sniff. Then I gave it 2 or 3 more sniffs, then a fourth. Before I knew it, the Oval Office was transformed into this beautiful, dreamlike fantasy land. I was then surrounded by warm neon lights, and my friends, the Corn Pops, arrived to dance with me and drink hot cocoa. Then they all tickled me until I giggled like a schoolgirl. It was everything I ever wanted and more. I realized that not everyone can have a magician for a son, but I'm grateful that I do. Hunter is the smartest man alive, and I'm the luckiest papa there is, folks.
Welcome to the Independent Review, a weekly podcast where we bring you the latest from the world of independent journalism. Whether you're a news junkie, a curious learner, or just looking for a fresh perspective away from the corporate media, this is the show for you. So join us now as we dive into the world of independent journalism on the Independent Review.
Welcome to the last independent review of 2023. We have a great show today with clips from Taylor Hudak, James Corbett, Union of the Unwanted and much more. Let's go to our first clip here with the AM Wakeup crew.
You guys on the show this morning, and I'm very excited about this, investigative journalist, a lady's had a actually fascinating fucking career, including a stint on the TV show Modern Family. We're here to talk about just how fucked up Pornhub is. You guys, Arden Young, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
How you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you.
I went through, I think, everything that you guys have up on YouTube as of right now yesterday, and I don't know, like, I've been on Team No Porn for quite a while, and it just did absolutely everything to be like, oh, okay, well, that was a good move, dude. That was a good move. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we've released 6 undercover videos so far. We have another one coming next week. And then we also released a little like bonus clip as well. So there's a total of 7 undercover videos we have so far out. And everything from just not verifying age or consent in the pornographic uploads these users are uploading, and also not verifying age or consent in the pornographic advertisements that they're running on their in-house platform. I'm sure you saw, we called in multiple times, talked to multiple customer care employees who all confirmed that user accounts for advertising would not be hurt if underage videos were uploaded. If underage videos were found, they told us multiple times they would not report to law enforcement. So they're playing this, they're playing the plausible deniability card on, oh, it's our users uploading potential illegal content. It's not us. We can't police everything. It's unreasonable. But they're past the point of plausible deniability because their own employees are admitting they know this happens. There's all these loopholes, and they're not doing anything about it because profits.
The videos, or I guess the videos with the product manager dude, where he's even like, hey, we've brought it up, we've tried to talk about it. Everybody kind of was on camera kind of at least said, well, we've tried to talk about it, but it's the same problem that we've encountered when talking to whistleblowers. where they'll think they're doing the right thing. Something is wrong. Something is clearly, something illegal or untoward or borderline illegal is happening. And so they do what they've been trained to do, which is go through the proper channels. But the proper channels exist to make sure that any sort of, untoward situation gets dealt with in-house, and the people who bring it to the attention get pushed away or shut up, not to actually resolve the problem.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened with Mike Farley, the product manager. He actually made sure to record a meeting of him speaking with the executives there. And he said that they told him to F off and shut up. So he's still there, after almost, I think, 11 years now. He was the 7th person to ever be hired at Pornhub, according to him. And, even though he's seeing all these things go on internally, he has personal beliefs that actually don't line up with Pornhub's public stances on things. He's still there. I think he's just very comfortable.
I don't know, man. I can be uncomfortable in places, but I'm not trying to stick around for 11 years.
Yeah, totally.
To something entirely different. But so what was Sound Investigations created specifically to do this? And then how did you get involved with them? Or are you? Yeah.
So, Sound Investigations was formed specifically to investigate the online porn industry. It was founded just at the beginning of 2023 by my friend, and it's just the two of us. He called me and he was like, "Hey, do you want to investigate the online porn industry?" And I was like, "Yes, I do." So that's what we do. We've been doing ever since February. And this is the first story that we've decided to do. So what we're going to do next, we don't know, but we want to stay within the vein of online sexual exploitation, tech facilitated sexual exploitation. Yeah.
I mean, last year around this time, with the absolute worst person that you could put at the forefront of it, there was a huge, for a while at least, a huge dust up over Twitter's carrying of sexually exploitative content, shit like that, and
Right.
rampant amounts of pedophilia and just exploitation in general. And had they not put like a serial grifter in Eliza Blue as the face of that campaign, it probably would still be going at this point.
Yeah, there's a huge lawsuit against Twitter going on right now, and this was pre-Elon Twitter, but the lawsuit is still ongoing. 2 underage boys, they were, I believe, 13 at the time, their videos were hosted on Twitter, but they were tricked by a trafficker who was posing as a girl from their school, and they were tricked into sending explicit videos and images of themselves, and this trafficker just kept escalating and escalating, getting more explicit videos from them. And finally, they were able to cut ties with their trafficker, and they thought they were out of the woods. It was a couple years after they had sent the videos, and suddenly they had just appeared on Twitter in 2020, and they got sent all around their school. They went viral. Finally, they told their parents, some guy pretended to be a girl and got sexual videos of us, and now they're on Twitter. So the parents were contacting Twitter, trying to get them taken down. And Twitter's response was, we have reviewed the videos, and we didn't find that they violate our terms of service. We will continue to host these videos because they don't violate anything. And so those videos actually stayed up for I don't know how long. Eventually, a parent was able to get in contact with someone within DHS who stepped out of their normal job duties to contact Twitter. So finally, Twitter was scared enough to take the videos down. But yeah, like 2020 Twitter was apparently just a complete mess. And I don't know, it might still be.
Oh, it's got to be. The thing is the hashtags. Like Eliza Blue and Elon said, well, we got rid of the hashtags. But if you look at Mouthy Buddha's work and the hashtags on Instagram and stuff like that, like the hashtag is, you can put anything in a hashtag. You could take and hashtag a Bitcoin address, right? Which is all different characters and numbers. And unless you have that exact hashtag, you can hide stuff throughout in the open, basically. Like, to police such a thing, I know back in 2020 on Facebook, someone had sent me something about these groups that were on Facebook. So I fired up a live and was reporting these groups on this live, and the live got filled with people who were pissed about this stuff, what was being shown on Facebook. Then I'm getting, in real time while I'm doing this live, I'm getting messages from people going, I've reported this, and they're telling me this, and they're sending me screenshots of what Facebook is saying, and Facebook's saying there's nothing we can do about it. You have to go through, you have to subjugate yourself to every picture, right, and report each picture and each profile individually, that you can't report the group. And then I went to go show why this is, and show how in their reporting system at the time, it was like nudity or sexual abuse. And then the way they would stage these pictures in these groups, there wasn't technically nudity and there wasn't technically sexual abuse. Technically.
Right.
So, and then when I went to show people this on a live and I hit report to report it again, boom, someone must have got in and doxed me and put up my one frame popped up of my iTunes account with my name, address, my credit card, everything. So I had to end that live right away. But I mean, just on the Facebook, the Instagram, I mean, Mouthy Buddha, what he had, I don't know if you've heard of his
I
work.
have, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what he exposed going, through the Russian different sites, and now we're seeing again. I don't know if you've seen the Wayfair when
I do remember that happening. Yeah.
Well, now someone posted something about on Etsy showing how you could get a pizza for $9,000, just a picture of a pizza for $9,000. Which now we've got the Pizzagate, the exploitation coming back up.
Yeah, that at least deserves an investigation on whoever is posting that.
Steve, I think your mic might be making that noise.
Oh, fun. All right.
Damn wires.
Is it me? I hope it's not me.
No, it's
okay.
No, I did get my new mic. Hopefully it's sounding a little bit better. I'm gonna have that hooked up hopefully today.
Hell yeah.
I've got so much extraneous crap going on, and it's just a couple of weeks till freaking Xmas, and I was putting up lights and shit yesterday. Anyway, but yeah, hopefully new mic is gonna be firing this week.
The thing with like Pornhub, like how much money is involved in Pornhub? I mean, do they charge?
Yeah. It's unclear exactly their total current profits, but I think it was 2021 they reported $460 million in profits and earnings. So I don't know how in 2022, 2023, what that has looked like. But I know that they did take quite a hit in 2020 or 2021 because Visa and MasterCard cut off some of their sites. So Visa and MasterCard no longer process payments for tube sites. ALO owned tube sites like Pornhub and XTube and stuff like that. They will, however, still process payments for the pay sites like Brazzers, Reality Kings, those types of sites also owned by ALO, the parent company of Pornhub. So, I mean, they own so many things. They write the pornography, they shoot the pornography, they distribute the pornography, they advertise on the pornography. They have a VPN service. I don't know if that's still in commission. They own so many things. A lot of what they're not even open about, so I don't even know. But I do know they own hundreds of pornography sites. A lot of them are very popular, at the forefront of probably what most North American porn users are watching.
And every once in a while you see like those, and I don't even know if they're comical or not, but like the breakdowns of like what porn is watched the most in each state or something like that. When it comes to yeah, I'm trying to figure out how I want to say this. Like, does it seem like there's we hear a lot about specific agendas being pushed through Pornhub. Have you been able to determine the veracity of that? Have you been able to see if there's like specific user targeting going on? Like, how does that algorithm work, and like what are they trying to feed people? Because my buddy Sam has talked about it a lot. Like, he's pretty open about like when he quit porn and why he did and stuff like that. Not acting in it, but consuming it. And that like every time he would go to watch something, it was consistently like pushing him either more gay or more trans in the straight dude content. And I don't, I'm trying to figure out, like, because it seems like there's no bottom to how low most of these people are willing to sink and what they're willing to push for a little bit more. So I didn't know if any of that's come up while you were looking into this.
Yeah, I know they heavily rely on cookies to track the life path of a user, and that was their words, not mine. So they heavily rely on those, so they don't like it when certain governments try to restrict their data collection. And then, in our last undercover video, there's a senior scriptwriter talking about how they try to market non-straight content to historically straight users in order to get them interested in a wider variety of content. Basically just maximizing the profits per person. So, as far as them having a gay agenda, I don't know. It's very possible. However, what I do have proof of so far is just them wanting to market the widest range of pornography possible to the single viewer in order to maximize those earnings for them.
Okay. It's like the whole thing plays into so many other mechanisms of control that are put down on average citizens. And we talk all the time about bread and circuses, and this is one of those things that is quite literally both bread and circus for everybody who uploads there. It's bread and circus for half of the people that are viewing it in the first place. And it's, in terms of what has the potential to warp people, that's the penultimate thing right there. So if it's not being agenda driven at like a company or policy level, I could totally understand that. But the overall role that it's playing.
Yeah, effectively, it almost doesn't matter if the intent is just, we want to maximize profits, or we actually want to interfere with someone's sexuality, because effectively, the results are going to be similar. If you're purposefully trying to sway someone's sexuality, then you are swaying someone's sexuality, whether or not you're doing it for the profits or for some social agenda,
Looking back at the TV career, and I don't like I missed regular TV right around the time that Bill Clinton got elected through now. It was like the last time like I owned a working television with cable. It was like 97, I think. However, studied a lot about it, talked to and am friends with a number of people who come from the industry. When you were on Modern Family, was there like what was that like? At least looking back and knowing what you know now about the way that a lot of this stuff works, like what is there anything that sticks out from that experience that was extra, I don't know, hectic or agenda driven, or seemed like it was part and parcel of this?
Modern Family specifically have no complaints about. It was fantastic. There's a lot of other kids on the show, or at least a few, that I was able to hang out with other kids, and everything was great. I do have to say that in general, working in the industry with other show business kids, they do mature a lot faster in a way that I don't believe is healthy. And in general, now coming out of the industry, I don't think it's any place for a kid. And not even just the set experience, like being on set, working on a show. I honestly don't think that's even the worst part. I think the worst part is a lot of situations that kids get in with agents and managers, with acting coaches, and with photographers. I really think that, in my opinion, in my experience, those are the most dangerous power dynamics a child can have in the industry. And a lot of the parents either don't know or don't do enough to protect their child because they're so desperate for their child to succeed, be famous, whatever it is. They've moved across the country to Hollywood to pursue this dream, and they're going to do whatever it takes, right? So I think you're setting yourself up for something tragic to happen if you go into the industry with a child, in my opinion.
I mean, yeah, from what we can, from what it looks like on the outside too. I know the way that I've heard the whole thing described is the industry itself is just this beast that people line up to go climb in the mouth of, it chews them up, and then after it shits them out, they get right back in line. Most of them,
yeah,
to go do it again.
It really does seem like that, and I think it's true. There's something about the industry that attracts people who just are so hungry, willing to do whatever it takes for the taste of fame or the taste of acceptance or like love, what they're searching for, that feeling of being loved, that it makes you susceptible to so many things, and people are more successful and they take advantage of you if you're so desperate to be in that line of work. The entire industry machine, the whole system is just bad. Like it's naturally, the way it's built is just setting children and just adults in general as well up to be exploited, because there's so many power dynamics in play in the industry that are just naturally there, they're naturally occurring, that people will absolutely exploit. Because when you're trying to be an actor, you have an agent or a manager, there's a power dynamic there. With the acting coach, there's another power dynamic. With different photographers you're going to, there's more. I'm sure, and we've all heard about like directors and producers, those power dynamics, but in my experience, it's the like agents, managers, acting coaches, and photographers that really, really are the most shameless exploiters of people coming to them.
Well, and it's one of those things where when you get into the even more nefarious ends of it, where you've got like the Peter Nygaards and the Epsteins and all these guys who are using like the fashion industry and the entertainment industry, then you have a ready-made stable of, okay, here's the management house. Okay, now we know these guys can be our recruiters and our groomers and all of that stuff, and they're in-house, but they're part and parcel of such a massive conglomeration of people that you could have, I mean, the plausible deniability in court for days on who knows and who doesn't know, and then something becomes a industry secret, and then you start to feel like, oh, well, now I've got to protect my people, now I've got to protect my craft, now I've got to protect my trade, I can't talk about any of this stuff. And so once people start to talk about it, they're dismissed as crazy, or they're bitter or jealous, or they didn't get the job they wanted and now they're trying to get back, and it's so dirty.
Well, yeah, and you're gaslit into thinking it's not as serious as you might feel sometimes, or, oh, that's just how that person is. It's just a funny thing about them. Like, just ignore it when they do that. I mean, that sort of stuff happens all the time. Even now, being years out of the industry, sometimes I'll think back on something that I thought was totally normal, and I will go, wait, if someone did that to my 12-year-old, I want to tear their head off. You know what I mean?
I mean, kind of, but do you have an example?
I have a lot of examples. So I was in an acting class when I was 12, from when I was 12 through when I was 14. And for a scene, I was made to make out with another 13-year-old girl in front of this male acting teacher, like probably 30 plus times. And to me at the time, I was told by this teacher, if you don't do this, if you aren't willing to do things like this, you are not good enough to make it. Then you are not fearless. You need to be fearless. You need to be uninhibited. You need to be willing to just tear your clothes off right now and be shameless about it. And so he would direct us to do things that were very, very sexual in nature. And in this class, we were all minors. I was 12, 13 at the time. The other girl was 12, 13 at the time. He would have girls ride each other in front of the class and try not to like fall off. It was so bizarre. So things like that, like situations I got in with acting coaches who were like, if you're not willing to do this, then you don't have what it takes. So that is what they'll use against you. I think that's the most common.
So fucked up. What kind of
power dynamic?
Putting that kind of pressure on a 12-year-old fucking kid, dude. I told everybody I was probably going to get upset and do a little yelling today, so I apologize. No, that's just, I mean, it does. I have an 11-year-old, you know, and my oldest is 17, and like my 11-year-old wants to get into like this kind of shit, and even independent media. I'm like, no.
Yeah, you know, my mom, who like guided me through the industry, she's a great mom, very vigilant. She was suspicious of a lot of people, but you know, there's so many situations you can get in, even with having a vigilant, wonderful, caring parent, that your parent just can't get you out of once you're in them. And for example, in this acting class, no parents were allowed. And that was the studio policy. And, you know, when you have 10, 15 other children in an acting class and all their parents are trusting this acting coach in this studio to care for them during class and to teach them, of course my mom's going to say, yeah, you know, sure. Like there's 15 other kids in this class. What's going to happen out in the open? You know what I mean? But things did happen out in the open. And later, when I was 15 or 16, I was privately contacted by the same acting coach who had me make out with that girl. And he solicited me for sex when I was 15 or 16 after I'd already been out of his class. And this man was in his 40s. And at the time, I thought so being a 15 or 16-year-old girl in the acting industry, I thought his solicitations were funny. I was laughing at them because I was taught to think that being sexually desired was funny or amusing because of my experiences in the industry. It's just something you laugh about. And I didn't
so you don't
realize.
think about it? I mean, it seems like that like if that's an instruction that's given to you, oh, it's not a big deal, just laugh it off. I mean, one, that's supposed to normalize it, right? And then it's supposed to give you in your head the permission to deviate from that if and when you want to, because it's not serious. It's already been something that's laughable or dismissible.
Yeah, and I saw 15, 16, 17-year-old girls going out with men much, much, much older than them all the time. So if I had been attracted to this predatory acting coach, I think I really would have been someone to say, yeah, let's meet up or whatever. And something really, really could have happened. And that's just the whole environment of the industry. It's like, oh, that person's a creep. Unless they're hot, then go for it. You know what I mean? And I think that is so twisted and toxic. And someone imposing that kind of mentality on your child when you're in the industry is almost inevitable, just because that's how things are. I mean, if some like ratchety looking acting coach dude is coming onto like a 15, 16-year-old girl, most of the time she's going to be grossed out. But if Tom Cruise, someone who looks like Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt is contacting your 15, 16-year-old girl, she might entertain it and get swept up into something that she doesn't realize how wrong it is.
I mean, you don't even have to be Brad Pitt. You could be Chris D'Elia.
Yeah, totally. Yes. Yeah, you could, if you're a known name, if you're a charming guy, if people know you, yeah, of course, that's going to be an intoxicating thing.
Jerry Seinfeld can basically buy a 15-year-old from her parents and freaking, Dane Cook and all that shit, dude. Like it's, it's so freaking twisted and so counterintuitive to natural law and natural rights and things like that. It really does. It upsets the hell out of me.
Now let's jump to this clip from Derrick, Broze and Ryan Cristian on the upcoming fluoride trial.
I want to make it clear to everybody, I am going to San Francisco. I will be representing TLAV. I'll be going every day to the trial, which is, as I said, it's 8 till 5, pretty much depending on how long it goes. So I'll be in there taking notes. If they'll allow me to bring in my computer, I'll try to live tweet, things like I did before. And we are raising money for that. I'm grateful to see Ryan was showing me we're almost to $1,000. We're aiming for about 6,000, and that's just kind of, we're going big for it. To let everybody know, I've already bought my flight from Mexico, where I live, to San Francisco. It cost me about $900. So the money there, that reimburses me for the flight's cost. That's great. If we could raise even more money, we would like to get a hotel or something so I can be comfortable and safe and do the work I need to do for the potentially 2 weeks that we're going to be out there. And then it would be nice to be able to eat a little bit every day as well. So, I mean, this isn't going to like buy me a new car or buy me some new shoes or anything like this. This is all straight going into the project so that I can be there in San Francisco in court every day. And then we'll probably be doing, if not daily, at least maybe probably weekly, bi-weekly conversations between me and Ryan to keep you guys informed, especially as we get the bombshells, which I expect they are going to have all 6 witnesses from the plaintiffs, the Fluoride Action Network. All the scientists are going to be there in person, and the government scientists, the sort of what they call the rent-a-coats, are going to be there in person too. So this opens up even more opportunities for potentially interviewing some of these scientists directly. So you don't even have to hear it directly from me or from Ryan. We'll talk to the scientists right after they testify in court and say, hey, can you tell the people what you just said in court and why they should be concerned about this? So there's a lot of potential here for getting some good content, producing, obviously I'm producing a number of written articles. We'll be producing video reports, interviews, articles. Maybe it'll end up turning into a little mini documentary depending on how things go. Because as I said, this could be the end of water fluoridation, or at least a major step towards ending water fluoridation in the US. So anybody who's got $5 extra, we appreciate it. I appreciate it. Like I said, it's all going into our fund here so we can make sure to give you guys the best coverage.
One of the most obvious and really one of the most painfully obvious parts of this, this been talked about for as long as I've ever been doing this work. And I think it's been provable that long that fluoride is a dangerous byproduct that has no real benefit at all for anybody consuming it. But on top of that, that they know that they've been pushed. We can get into the whys, but at the very least, because they'd otherwise have to pay to dispose of it, where now they're making you pay to put it in your water. So give us a quick background on this work, why that's important. And then let's talk about what you're trying to do with the trial.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, as you said, like we've had evidence. I've been researching fluoride since 2010. The evidence was there then, and honestly, I've learned quite a bit in my research just this year of doing, work preparing for this trial to resume and stuff. And the fact is that there have been scientists warning about fluoride lowering IQ since at least the 1950s, pretty much right when it began. And thankfully, we got to a point in 2016 where the Fluoride Action Network and the Food and Water Watch and several others as plaintiffs decided to sue the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, because the EPA denied their petition. They basically filed a petition under the Toxic Substance Control Act, which was passed in 2016, and it allows citizens to go to the government and say, hey, we believe this substance is toxic. You need to regulate it or ban it. So the Fluoride Action Network filed a petition. The EPA denied it, ignored it. So then they filed a lawsuit. That was back in 2016. Here we are, 2023, going on 2024, and we're still not done with this trial yet. But in the summer of 2020, it actually began. And of course, everything was locked down then. So I started reporting on it for TLAV in June, and then it wrapped up in August. And it was taking place in San Francisco, but everybody was on Zoom. And I just followed I've done quite a bit of court reporting. It's kind of a different specific type of reporting because you got to be just ready to like catch as many things, especially when you're not sitting there listening to Zoom where you can screen record and listen to later. Like if you're there in person, you just got to be writing as fast as you can, getting all the notes. And there's a lot to it, but I do enjoy doing it and I think it's important work because whether we're talking about the fluoride trial or any other trial, you're not going to get the full picture if you're not there in person or if somebody's not reporting live in person, because the mainstream is just going to give you the top headline of the day. As we've seen with this fluoride lawsuit, this fluoride trial, there has been no mainstream reporting at all. The only reporting we've found from anything that could be slightly considered mainstream would be Bloomberg Law, which is not really even mainstream. It's like a division of Bloomberg that focuses on legal cases and stuff. And it's like subscription only. So it's not like being seen by that many people. There has been no major reporting by any of the corporate media outlets acknowledging like, hey, the fact, which is like, you don't have to necessarily say fluoride is going to kill people, even though we have the evidence for the IQ harm and all that, but at least to acknowledge this is a historic trial. The thing that the CDC claims, one of the things that the CDC claims is the top health achievement of the 20th century, along with vaccines and everything else, is now on trial. And there are Harvard scientists and some of the most credentialed professionals when it comes to this science warning and talking about the data they found. And even just in that first year of the trial, my reporting showed that we know it lowers IQ, that Harvard scientist Philip Grandjean said that he was threatened for his conclusions about fluoride. He said that the fluoride lobby has taken over the World Health Organization. I mean, there's so many little bits and pieces of nuggets that came out because I was following this case. And essentially what happened is at the end of 2020, it got delayed. They said they wanted to wait for some more studies to come out, including that study there. They were waiting for the National Toxicology Program. But as we've learned since then, the National Toxicology Program, they still have not publicly officially released their report on fluoride, but we have 2 draft versions of it from May 2022 and September 2022, where these scientists at the National Toxicology Program, in their own words, say that the study was done, it was ready for public release, and their conclusions were that fluoride does cause lower IQ in children, in addition to many other problems. So that we have that information, the government's just refusing to make it official by releasing it. And then we also have, through emails that were released through the trial, we saw that the head of the Health and Human Services, Rachel Levine, was involved, as well as some other officials, was involved with blocking the release of this data and this information. So, I mean, we have clear examples here that this chemical is a toxin, as we've known before, but now it's in court records. Now it's in federal courts. We've got federal government scientists fighting to get their science to the people. And we've got different US government officials doing everything they can to block the release of that data. And so that's all been going on in the background. And now where we're at, the judge, Edward Chin, has, they're finally going to have the second phase of the trial. Basically that since that study never came out, the NTP study, we have the draft versions. The judge said, okay, we'll look at the draft version. You can bring back some witnesses. We'll look at any news studies that have been done since 2020. And it's starting again January 30th in San Francisco. It'll now be in person, and it's going to run for 2 weeks, January 30th to February 14th. And since we're going to be in person now, and they're not even doing Zoom anymore, so there's not even an option for me to do it remotely. I am going to be going in person to San Francisco. It might not last the whole 2 weeks, but that's what the court has kind of slated for that time. So that's kind of where we're at now. And the goal with this article is just to remind everybody, like, hey, this is still going on in case you forgot. And, I kind of list just a little 4 summary points, which I just kind of covered, of some of the past reporting, because I do think there's just, I like everything we've covered here today. Like, why are more people not talking about the pesticide issue? Why is this fluoride trial not front and center? I mean, besides us, and I got to go on the high wire with Del Bigtree, a few other outlets, there really has not been any coverage, of course, from the corporate media, as I mentioned, but even very little coverage from the alternative independent media, when this could be, I know there's a lot going on, but this could be a victory for us. If this trial goes the way that it should, this could spell the end of water fluoridation in the United States. Now, it's very difficult to even imagine something good like that happening, because there's a lot of forces going up against, the people trying to wake people up to this. But there's some potential here to start 2024 out on a good foot. Now, of course, even if the judge did rule that fluoride is a toxin, we probably will be locked in legal battles for years. I mean, there's going to be appeals. There's going to, so, and who knows, would the CDC even act if the judge says, hey, you know what, based on the evidence, we know fluoride is a toxin, it violates the TSCA, and, action needs to be taken. But we know how the government works. That could be a year of legal blah, blah, whatever. And in the meantime, people are still being exposed to this toxin. I mean, I hope that's not what happens, but it's possible.
Yeah, they think about this, guys. They're literally going to be using, if that's the case, your tax dollars to fight to keep you unhealthy. They really think about how that looks. That this whole time they know this is dangerous, and they have a vested interest in keeping this in your water. These are these examples that really highlight what the real structure is. Not every individual with their individual actions, but what the government as an entity is. It is not about your safety or your interests. I mean, at one point, maybe, but it's so blatantly obvious with stuff just like this. And that's the craziest thing to me, as Derrick just outlined, right? That what we're talking about here is that the information has already been revealed. It's been leaked. We already know what they're fighting for you not to see. And so that means if Derrick can see it, if we can publish it on TLAV, if others, and Dell and others, David Knight, for example, gave TLAV and you a shout out, was talking about the work recently. David Knight, who left InfoWars, they had kind of a riff. But so the idea being is that it's all there. So ask yourself, if it is there and we can prove it's real, and it is, it's not debatable, where are the bigger names? Where are the corporate media? This is something that should matter to anybody who genuinely is interested in exposing this truth. But of course, this is how this tends to go, the flow of information, right? This won't matter for people in those fields until it's something that they could probably benefit from, or that it's something that they're allowed to look into. The point is just, again, demonstrating our value, demonstrating Derrick's excellent work, and being ahead of this story so far that you'll realize that he was years ahead. And this is not about Derrick's opinion on what fluoride is. We're talking again about information coming from a government report that proves all the things he's been saying, the IQ issues, and even worse, the toxicity in general. And it just doesn't do anything. In fact, again, they fight to keep it in your water. I mean, it's just so mind blowing to me. And I'm willing to bet you, as soon as this becomes something prominent, hopefully it does, either way, that's a win. But mark my words, it's going to be something that Tucker Carlson or somebody like that briefly points to, gives you half the story, and then probably fights for some other angle for why it still should be used from some Republican reason. That's what I keep seeing, the AI conversation. And maybe we can finish on this if you'd like to comment. Now the Republican side of Alex Jones just had Natural News, Mike Adams on, and they were literally arguing about how this AI is bad, but here's how we can use AI to fight back. And again, I'm never one to dismiss that conversation using the kind of tech, but it's interesting for me. AI of all things, I think, is the, I'll use some tech to fight back, but that kind of concept, I'm completely on an absolute no-go kind of mentality. But I think that's an interesting step, and to show you how it all of a sudden becomes the thing that was absolutely not possible is now, well, because the right-wing people say we might consider it from this angle, now suddenly it works, and the same in the left. Anyway, back to the fluoride. Go ahead. Well, if you want to comment on that,
Yeah.
I've been all over the place.
No, it's good. I mean, I definitely could foresee something like what you're describing there, where we get to a point of, I mean, because the thing is, even people like Alex Jones, he was one of the first person that I heard talking about this back in 2010. I don't hear him talk so much about fluoride anymore. And obviously his views and his approach have changed quite a bit. He went from being the person warning everybody about the left-right paradigm to telling everybody to stay in the left-right paradigm. But nonetheless, I think that there, funky stuff like that could happen, but at the end of the day, we have the truth. We have the information. I hope we get some more coverage. I didn't see the David Knight coverage, so shout out to him. He does good work. I hope we get more people. I don't even really care about the credit at the end of the day if the information gets out there. Yes, it's nice when people show us some love because they know that we've been putting in the work. And I have sat through hours and hours of court proceedings to get this information to everybody. And that is tedious and sometimes mind-numbing. But I'm prepared to do it again.
Next, we have this clip from the Jimmy Dore Show with guest Whitney Webb.
So talk a little bit about this. I saw this on YouTube, Whitney Webb, Bitcoin and the plot to destroy financial privacy. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so this was my speech at the Bitcoin conference earlier this year in May, and it was also turned into an article that was published in Bitcoin Magazine, which puts on that conference. So basically, the public-private partnership that I talked about earlier, that's run by an Israeli intelligence official that wants to name misinformation spreaders as cyber criminals. This speech is about them. They're planning essentially to end online anonymity and financial privacy. And as I mentioned earlier, the DOJ and the FBI and the Secret Service are all members. So are Israeli and UK intelligence, and so are all the big banks. Like Bank of America's on there. And then you've got like Silicon Valley companies. And
that's why
WEF partnership against cybercrime, along with the Carnegie Endowment, has an equivalent program. The two of them have been basically pushing for the end of online anonymity, or really online privacy and financial privacy, and also pushing to merge banking regulators and intelligence agencies in the U.S.
That's why
madness.
That's why.
And the guy that was in charge of Carnegie at the time is now CIA director under Biden, and they were basically saying that the way this would be implemented would be through a big cyber attack on the banks.
That's why Jordan Peterson was calling. That's why Jordan Peterson was on talking about we need to end anonymity online because he's
after
a
he started hanging out with Netanyahu.
Yeah, right? he got paid by Daily Wire a while ago. He got a bunch of money. So him and Douglas Murray's a shill for his, and they're paid Douglas Murray's got all this new work done. Ever since the war started in Gaza, and he's out there, he looks like Sharon Osbourne before her surgery now. They're paid by Israel. They're shills. Jordan Peterson, that's why he was spouting that. He's like, we get anonymity is the problem.
Really?
And I remember being like, why is he saying that?
Nikki Haley too.
Why. Yeah, that's why. He sold the fuck out. That's why.
So in here, in Glendale, California here, there's a news headline yesterday that they've been a victim, their school system has been a victim of a cyber attack, and that the cyber attackers are demanding their ransom. So they installed ransomware on their system, and to get them to take it off, they want ransom, and they want it paid in Bitcoin. And so now I wouldn't doubt if that's the CIA doing that, so that people now see that, oh, we got to get rid of Bitcoin because you can't track terrorists and cyber terrorists because they use Bitcoin. So we have to get rid of this Bitcoin and this blockchain monetary system. Is that crazy?
They want to keep blockchain, but they want to criminalize private Bitcoin transactions.
And do you think that would be a good way for them to do it, a false flag like that?
A bunch of little ones like that on a school?
They've already been building the narrative. So remember the whole October 7th thing? There was reporting that it was later debunked from the Wall Street Journal saying that Hamas financed October 7th using crypto donations, specifically Bitcoin. And then that turned out not to be the case, but it was spread around that, Bitcoin and crypto are being used to fund terrorism. And all these congressmen in the US were like, let's regulate crypto now because, it's being used to fund terrorism. So we need to surveil more closely crypto transactions to prevent that, i.e. reducing financial privacy and online, right?
Then it came out, it was really Bibi Netanyahu with suitcases of cash. Donating to them?
Something like that. But part of the reason this is happening is because of how they want to, basically Wall Street in the US, these big banks that are part of this whole cybercrime thing are the ones that want to issue a CBDC for the US. It won't be called a CBDC because the central bank won't be issuing it directly, right? But Wall Street probably will be, and they want to be the ones surveilling and controlling and basically having complete control over your finances. And so financial privacy has to go out the window for that to be able to happen, whether it's a CBDC or a Wall Street issued digital dollar.
And so the head of the U.S. Fed in Minneapolis, Kashkari, there's a video I just showed on the show this week. He's perplexed by the push for CBDCs because he says, why would an American want this? If I want to send money, I can use Venmo. There's other ways of digitally sending money and receiving money. Why do I need it from a centralized bank? What's in it for us? There's nothing in it for us. So why would a guy like him be allowed to say that?
Yeah. Well, because in the U.S., the central bank, the Federal Reserve, is owned by the private banks. So they don't do anything the private banks don't want. And so if you have a direct issued CBDC, like is being piloted in like China and like these other countries around the world where the central bank is directly issuing that currency, basically, for every, in the US, it would mean that for every dollar produced, they would have to hold, one reserve backing it up, like a 1-to-1 ratio. But Wall Street doesn't want that because they engage in something called fractional reserve banking,
right.
Which is where basically like you deposit $1,000 in the bank and they keep like $10 and, loan out the other 900. And that's why bank runs happen and banks go insolvent and all this stuff. But it also allows them to pump up these crazy Wall Street casinos, and they have no intention of changing their behavior at all. And so they can't have a direct issued CBDC and continue fractional reserve banking. So what they're trying to do is have something called deposit tokens or bank issued stable coins, where they get to all these private banks, these Wall Street banks hold the reserves and can do fractional reserve banking with it. Because if the Fed were doing it, then the Fed would have to keep it in that 1-to-1 ratio. But if Wall Street is doing it, then they can keep their insane casino going on forever. While also, surveilling Americans on behalf of intelligence, which is why you have this push I mentioned earlier to merge banks and intelligence agencies going on with all of this. So instead of, Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve on behalf of the government programming and surveilling you through a CBDC, it will be Jamie Dimon doing it.
And Bill Gates is going to have his fingers in there somehow.
Of course. He's not one to miss out,
No. He'll write the software that does it or something like that.
Or steal the software.
Or steal the software. Exactly. I'm sorry. I misspoke. So it seems like we're at a real crisis point, right? There's a real tipping point. And do you think that do you see the American people or any people worldwide getting wise to this and having any kind of pushback? I think COVID kind of did wake people up to some things. And I think that kind of backfired for them, the COVID. That was like their test run.
Yeah, definitely.
It was like their test run.
And I think that's why censorship is escalating. They want to keep the info from spreading. And the next time there's a big event, they don't want the counter narrative to be freely available.
It's like a lot of dry runs, all these things. Just keep them coming, see which one sticks.
So yeah. What is your hunch on the future? Where do you see? So it's 2023. Where do you see us being in 2030? And do you think Trump will be any different?
So, 2030, it's kind of hard to say what's going to happen between then and now. What I will say as far as the cyber attack stuff, the World Economic Forum, their number 2 guy after Klaus Schwab, in January of this year said that before 2025, there's going to be a massive cyber attack. And if you recall, Klaus Schwab during COVID said stuff like, oh, soon there will be a cyber pandemic that will, in comparison to COVID, make COVID look small by comparison, paraphrasing, but something like that. So the risk of that happening soon, something like that, is very high. And of course, if something like that does happen in the US, there will be a Cyber Patriot Act that will be rushed through. And some particular nation state, we can probably guess which ones, will be blamed. And as has been the case up to this point, when a nation state, whether it's Iran, China, or Russia, or any of the bad guys, are blamed, the reasons for attribution are practically non-existent, or it's all intelligence fronts attributing the blame. Like this recent one blaming China for infiltrating U.S. infrastructure was this company called Recorded Future that was created with In-Q-Tel money. That's the CIA. Yeah. And there was no pushback on that all from the media, just this headline of China's infiltrating everything. So imagine if a big cyber attack happens, how that will be.
Whitney,
when that happens, the enemy, it's very clear, is going to be privacy. No one can be online. We have to know who everyone is online to stop these acts of cyber terrorism, whether that act of cyber terrorism is misinformation or a big hack or critical infrastructure goes down. It could be all of those things. It could be one of those things. It doesn't really matter. And if you think about stuff like the anthrax attack in 2001 and the panic that generated, that killed under 10 people. But was just the fear and panic from it was able to push through a ton of biosecurity legislation that helped bring us what happened during COVID-19. So they don't necessarily need a big death count, but the head of DHS said that the next cyber attack is going to be killware, which definitely sounds scary.
Come on.
Yeah, but look it up. Look it up. Mayorkas talking about killware, saying it's the next big thing in cybersecurity. Yeah. So, people should be really aware that this is going to happen, and there's going to be a push to link your ID, your government issued ID, it'll be a digital ID because of where things are going, to your internet access. And this has been the goal from a very long time, going back to when after 9/11, they tried to create total information awareness, the DARPA program. They want to know not just what you're posting online, they want to see what you're reading online also. Literally everything you do online, all your financial activity, they want all of it.
Like Jesus
and
has?
If you listen, it's wild. And if you listen to people like Eric Schmidt, who was recently talking about what he feels like needs to be done to stop misinformation.
Eric Schmidt is the former head of Google.
Misinformation. I'm sorry.
To tell people who Eric Schmidt is.
He's the former CEO of Google. Basically, Henry Kissinger named him his heir before he died.
Oh, that's awesome.
And he's the guy that's funding the salaries of the people in the Biden administration, which should be totally illegal, by the way, and completely dominate science and technology policy of the Biden administration.
And what did he say?
That people who publish or post misinformation on social media should be reported to law enforcement.
Well, Osama bin Rogan is still at large.
So how do we protect our money?
That's a really good question. So, I am not like a financial expert or advisor, so I don't feel comfortable telling people exactly where to put their money. But what I do personally is I try and put my money in things I will need if the world gets totally insane. So I don't have to worry about feeding my family, how I'm going to have lights on in my house and all sorts of stuff like
guns.
that.
Guns and gold?
I mean, whatever works for you, but I think what's important for people is to sort of think through this stuff because, knowing people, for example, in Argentina, their economy collapsed in 2001. For talking to people who lived through that, they've all said that if you give in to the panic, that's the worst thing you can possibly do. Like mental preparedness is very important. And that doesn't cost anything, does it? And also, if the internet's going to be heavily censored, it would make sense to back up information you care and value and you think you might need in the future offline also. So
when you say you put your money into things that you need, what do you mean by that?
Well, so I live in Chile, so it's a lot easier for me than it would have been if I lived in the US still. But I bought a little plot of land and saved up for 15 years and have a little house on it, so I don't have to pay rent anymore. going to try and grow as much of my own food as possible. Have sort of my own water supply, stuff like that. I mean, not obviously it's going to look different for everyone based on, your situation. Maybe stock up on, a couple weeks of groceries or something if stuff goes insane. I mean, we saw what happened with COVID where everything got shut down for a couple weeks. What happens if some crazy crisis happens and, the grocery stores aren't working normally or you can't get into one normally.
Order from Amazon again because they were still open.
Or pay with your Palm to get your... it's crazy. The UN is moving all of their humanitarian assistance programs to basically like the WorldCoin model, like scan your eyeball. If you want, your humanitarian rations. It's called Building Blocks, the World Food Program. Insanely Orwellian. They onboarded like millions of Ukrainians onto that recently. But a lot of Palestinian refugees in Jordan have been living like that for years. And people around the world, and they're basically like, oh, you want food? You want to live? Give us your iris scan. Not cool.
No, not cool. So, hey, what about India? Didn't they go fully digital ID?
Yeah, the Aadhaar program that was it's somewhat Bill Gates affiliated. This billionaire, this Indian billionaire was behind it, and he's very cozy with Bill Gates. And there's been a lot of problems with it where like if the system decides you aren't you get blocked out of everything. And that's happened to many people.
Yes. People, I've heard stories or read stories of that happening to people in India. They can't get food, and they actually, some of them died.
Who do they call for customer service? Because I call them usually. Like, who do they? Do they have another country that?
Why was India the first country to do this, you think?
Well, because all this kind of stuff, like the digital ID stuff specifically, is tested on very vulnerable populations who can't say no.
Remember the central digital currency that failed spectacularly? Modi said money's going to be illegal, like cash is going to be illegal.
They did do that.
Or worthless. Again, it was a disaster.
But they didn't bring cash back, did they? They're still going digital or no? In India, I mean. Do you know?
I'm not familiar with how India is developing it right now.
Okay. All right. Well,
in terms of currency, but the Aadhaar system is still definitely there, and I think very problematic. And people get their data stolen from it all the time. It's like not safe. Gets hacked all the time.
Oh boy.
They say it's safer and to keep people from like defrauding their benefits, even though there's no evidence that people are doing that.
Now I know why they kept talking about internet access as a human right in undeveloped nations, which it's not.
It's not.
Because all these poor people are just walking around untracked. We don't have any other data. They were just out there in the wasteland, not getting their rights for us to
untracked by Google, untracked by the banks. So that's what they all need to be onboarded to the slavery system.
Okay, well, Whitney Webb, thank you for making time for us. I appreciate all the information. Everybody, check out her book, One Nation Under Blackmail, and. Wow, it's scary. So are you a pessimist or an optimist about the future?
No, I'm pretty optimistic about it because I think people have really had enough. But I think people need to keep in mind, too, that like the online information space, even now, is more manipulated than it's ever been. And I think most Americans and people generally are just really like checked out and really aren't buying all of this. And so much is going on. There's so many like sophisticated bots in this chat GPT era that are trying to make us feel pessimistic, I think. Because if people, I feel like this happened in 2016 where they tried to demoralize people by being like putting out all these polls saying like Hillary Clinton's definitely going to win. It's like 99% probable. And then it wasn't like that at all. I think they do that kind of influence ops all the time to try and, demoralize people. And so I think it's very important to spend time in the real world and not just online, specifically when you're trying to gauge public opinion about these things. And when you do that, it's very hard not to be hopeful because people get it. And I think, whether in the US or Chile, people know that the big banks, the powerful corporations, and the politicians who are in bed with them steal from the people and want to keep stealing. And if you, approach it from that, people get that and don't want that to continue and are fed up and sort of checked out, but if you go online, I mean, it's a totally different world half the time. So I don't know. It helps to unplug, to keep your head straight.
Hey, Whitney, I have one quick question. I know you just have a minute, but I've been watching a lot of Tony Blair, and he's really big on digital ID and all of that.
Yes.
But he seems to be getting a lot of pushback. What are your observations about Tony Blair?
Yeah, so, well, I mean, Tony Blair is, he's like the Bill Clinton of Britain. He's, very in bed with a lot of these agendas and very willing to sell out people, whether it's British people or really anyone else, to, the corporate overlords. As far as digital ID goes, I mean, that's been his new thing ever since he founded the Tony Blair Institute for Change, or whatever it's called. But when he was Prime Minister of Britain, he was pushing to have a government issued ID in Britain. And there was a lot of pushback against it because of concerns about, Orwellian actions by the state. But of course, there's a big push to have it happen sort of anyway in Britain now. But he's trying to implement that same program elsewhere as well, and definitely pushing for a lot of this digital ID stuff, which the idea of the whole digital ID thing is to have this one ID tied to literally everything you do, including all of your online activity, your medical history, your cell phone carrier, your travel. I mean, literally everything. Have all of this in one centralized place that is very likely that basically intelligence agencies are going to use to surveil you. And the real danger of it is that they're going to use this to sort of do predictive policing, is what they call, which is what Palantir, the contractor for all of this in the US, has been doing for a long time, to try and predict crime before it happens. And there was a big push for this under the Trump administration. From William Barr specifically, he said it was about stopping mass shootings before they can happen. And they were trying to create this organization modeled after DARPA called HARPA, which Biden actually made. It's called ARPA-H. They just moved one letter to the end.
Oh my God.
From Trump's.
They don't predict shit. I
know, but it was putting... I know, but it's not about that. That's what they say it's about. There's the public justification, right? And so basically they wanted to put AI in charge of going through people's social media history to identify warning signs in people who might be violent in the future, all of this stuff. If you apply this to all this other misinformation stuff and treating misinformation, which we know is just information the state doesn't agree with most of the time, to a crime or to terrorism, it starts to get really insane. And the best way to stop this is to opt out of big tech and opt out of big social media and start building or looking for some sort of alternative, because they're very complacent in the sense that they think everyone's going to stay dependent on all of these platforms and services. And we can make alternatives, or we can do something else. We don't have to use, Google and Microsoft, who are all contractors with the IDF and, U.S. intelligence and the government and all of this stuff. We don't have to do that. We can do something else. And then it all falls apart for them if we starve them of our data.
That's right. That's
well,
great.
I've just read an article this morning, and I think it's adorable that they're warning that if the liberal class doesn't stand up for workers, that we're going to have fascism will come to America, and it's going to become in the guise of Trump and his Christian fascists. And I'm like, where the fuck have you been living for the last 10 years? We've been living in a completely fascist surveillance state since 9/11 to fucking begin with. Barack Obama, the liberal class are the fascists. There's not some other fascists coming. I would say
they're all pretty much fascists at the end of the day.
Yes.
Both sides of the purple party.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yes. That this idea, I mean, people out there who I respect are still saying, fascism's coming, and it's only going to be a certain type of fascism. It's like, you fucking morons. And
we got to be.
The Democrats right now are like largely financed and controlled by people like Eric Schmidt and Reid Hoffman, all these Silicon Valley billionaires, and a lot of their companies are completely fused with U.S. intelligence.
Yes.
Completely fused. I mean, the CIA helped create Google. The CIA helped create Palantir, Peter Thiel's company, who's a big Republican donor. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I mean, they're all...
That's right. So what I'm saying is fascism is here.
There's nothing more fascist than Silicon Valley. We should really stop using their products. If you want fascism to stop, I think that would be a good starting point.
Yeah. I mean, there's just a childish idea that fascism isn't already here. I had... I hate to keep bringing him up but Cornel West, he was here. He was saying, he's calling Trump a neo-fascist, and he wouldn't apply that. I'm like, that if we aren't careful, fascism's going to come to America. It's been here for a long time. What fucking world are you living in that you don't see the fascism's here and you can't see it? It's right in front of your fucking face and you can't see it. Holy shit. How much worth? Anyway, I have to let you go.
Please come back.
Please come back, Whitney. It's always great to talk to you.
Sure, whenever. Thank you.
Now, let's take a look at this clip from the Indie News Network on Julian Assange.
Who are these people?
This is happening. We're gonna get to this, so keep an eye on your calendar. Set the date for this date. If you're in the London area around this time, please gather outside the Royal Courts of Justice. You can find more info at freeassangeemergencytoolkit.com. So, yeah. So we're going to read from the dissenter. We're going to read Kevin Gostola here. And he writes, Day X is here. Assange granted hearing that may be last opportunity to stop extradition. Right? So the United Kingdom's High Court of Justice granted WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange a final appeal hearing that will be held on the February of 20 and 21st. Right? So that's what? 2 months away, pretty much?
Yep.
So right at the end of February. So here's Stella Assange, right? She writes, Day X is here. The public hearing at the Royal Courts of Justice will be on the 20 and 21st of February. It may be the final chance UK to stop Julian's extradition, right? So she tells you to gather outside the court at 8:30 a.m. on both days. Okay. So Kevin Gostola writes, the UK's High Court of Justice granted WikiLeaks Assange a final appeal hearing, right? Stella Assange, who is married to Julian, posted an announcement. Excuse me. Day X is here. It may be the final chance for the UK to stop Julian's extradition. Gather outside the court at 8:30, right? It's now or never. So, Julian Assange has been jailed at His Majesty's Prison Belmarsh for the past 4.5 years. Over the past year and a half, he has endured another difficult stretch of legal limbo. The same court that will hear Assange appeals denied the WikiLeaks founder hearing in early June. Assange legal team submitted what is known as their grounds for appeal in mid-July 2022. The High Court waited nearly a year to simply refuse to give Assange a hearing. By denying Assange a hearing, he never had a chance to argue that extradition to the United States to face Espionage Act charges would violate his right to freedom of expression as a journalist. In 2021, the High Court ruled in favor of the U.S. government after they appealed a district judge's decision that found extradition would be oppressive to Assange's mental health, given the widespread inhumane treatment that has been documented in U.S. jails and prisons. That ruling came on International Human Rights Day, right? So, Assange's legal team will pursue their final appeal on much more narrow grounds that were only allowed to submit a 20-page filing to the court for the February hearing. The High Court did not have to grant Assange a 2-day hearing. They could have once again rejected the Assange's legal team's efforts to challenge extradition. It would have potentially given the U.S. government an opening to fly Assange to the U.S. and arraign him on Espionage Act charges before the year ended. If the UK appeals court does not block extradition, then Assange may have a chance to appeal to the European Court of Human Rights. However, there are swirling questions about whether U.S. authorities would request that UK authorities transfer him to their custody before the Assange legal team could appeal to the Human Rights Court. The February appeal hearing is additionally remarkable because it will just come a few weeks before Super Tuesday in the 2024 Republican presidential primary. Former President Donald Trump, who faces criminal charges in multiple U.S. courts and was president when Assange was indicted on Espionage Act charges, is the heavy favorite to become the Republican Party's nominee. Trump has maintained his silence on Assange. Faced with a Senate impeachment trial in January 2021, he declined to pardon Assange or NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden because he was afraid it would give several Senate Republicans a reason to back his impeachment. As for President Joe Biden and Democrats, the Democratic Party has refused to hold a primary. Biden will be the pardon's nominee. Colin, what happened this week to Donald J. Trump and his run for the White House?
The Colorado Senate removed Trump off the ballot.
Right.
And as we were saying, we said this earlier today. Matthew Ho. You want to speak up regarding what happened to you? Because people were like, there were certain people in our space who were making the case, oh, this is actually a good thing. You know, that.
Yeah, no.
First of all, this is the idea that they were able to do this. Well, here's the thing. If it goes to the Supreme Court, they're going to toss that out.
Yeah, like Clarence Thomas has already written the check for this. Like, we're good. Right. To me, this is this right here. This is hey, you better shut your mouth. Like, or your run ain't gonna happen. So, like, that's what this is to me. Because it's not like he needs that particular state. You know?
But it's just, again, I think, it's two things. This, to kind of give Democrats cover to not do anything regarding Assange, especially given the date. But then, more importantly, it's the idea of, oh, we haven't done shit for people, so we're going to actually try and cheat our way into
One of the other candidates was talking to a particular commentator by name of Jimmy Dore. I don't know if you know Obama 2.0 Vivek Ramaswamy, but he was asked on the Dore show how you would deal with Assange, and he said, well, pardon him first day, definitely. Right?
Yeah, right.
That was what he said. What's the issue with that, Care Bear? To pardon him means what? What would have to happen first?
He would need to win.
Well, yes.
Have to be,
but also, more importantly, even if he won, what would have to first for you to even be able to pardon him?
I'm not following.
He's got to be convicted.
Right.
So the rule is call the DOJ, make them drop the charges. That's the thing you do. You have the DOJ drop the charges. Like, he gets out that day if you do that.
Right, but that kind of goes to what I just said. Like, you said Vivek was like, oh, I pardoned him. I'm like, yeah, right.
Right.
So...
Yeah, it's you're willing to let him be convicted.
So really what Vivek was saying was bullshit. Really.
Yes. Oh, yeah. So, and among many people who are like, well, I'll pardon him. No. It's not just pardoning. You have to drop the charges so that this precedent isn't set. Right? Which is also, what's the other option they gave him? They gave him another option, Assange. As we talked about it. Plea guilt.
Which he's not doing.
Right.
Which he's not doing.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so as I was saying, this is just a perfect distraction in terms of, well, for Trump as well. Because it kind of takes the heat off of him for a little bit in terms of what he's going through right now. But more importantly, this gives cover for Democrats, especially given Trump, that they know, oh, we haven't done shit for people. So as we were saying earlier, they wouldn't have to go through what they're doing with Trump if they were doing what they were supposed to do. Like, it would just be water under the bridge. But because they have not done anything, now they have to essentially cheat in order to and play dirty in order to try and get by the nation.
I'll own up. I wasn't the one who put those dots together. That was Indy in my ear, being like, hey, that guy, like I watched that guy ain't it, and here's why. And he's heard it from a ton of people. And like, no, pardoning's dumb. Like, if convicted, then yeah, absolutely pardon him. But before then, so, and we're going to get to some other options here in a bit, but, so as for President Joe Biden and Democrats, the Democratic Party has refused to hold a primary. Biden will be the party's nominee, right? We know this. So the Israeli government's war on Gaza, which the Biden administration has wholeheartedly backed, has killed more than 70 journalists. The number's even way more than that now. I think it's like in the 80s.
Yeah.
So the tacit support for a cruel military siege against over 2 million Palestinians has cost Biden in 2024 general election polls, suggesting how he might perform against Trump, though that does not mean that Trump is any less supportive of the war. Okay, all Trump's got to do is shut the fuck up, though.
Right.
That's all he's got to do. As one person being bad, you shut the fuck up. People assume, So
I just wonder, though, if Trump is able to help himself.
It depends. It depends on how he handles that, So, and some people will still take him over someone else already. Yeah. So it's like, if people were aware, we're going to get to that in our next, in my next story for sure about Trump's ties to Israel, but we'll get there. So an unprecedented trial involving Espionage Act charges against a publisher, which have openly condemned by nearly all reputable civil liberty, human rights, and press freedom orgs in the world, would likely undermine some of the Biden's campaign message. After all, it is hard for Biden to argue that he is the only candidate who can prevent Trump from further destroying democracy and freedom when his administration has steadfastly backed the extradition of a journalist. How can Biden speak about the way in which Trump and Republicans may undermine and take away Americans' freedom of expression under the First Amendment when a trial against Assange could blow a massive hole in this core liberty? Not to mention, it is now known that government agencies under Biden pressured social media platforms to censor posts expressing alternative views. Right? So, those who care about freedom of the press and the much more broader case of human rights have a moment to force an outcome that could spare Assange. Political pressure may grow in Congress, but the slow, grinding gears of the UK legal system might delay an outcome again. After the hearing in February, what stops the High Court from waiting until late 2024 to deny Assange's appeal and grant ultimate approval for extradition? It seems possible that Biden and Trump might not have to worry about Assange getting in the way of their presidential campaigns, and that would mean another year of detention at Belmarsh and still no end in sight for this political case. So that's why they're doing this now.
Yeah.
Right? So just so that they could, if they wanted to, hold him longer.
Yes.
He's been in limbo now for, years. Years and years and years and years. So, yeah. Bad. So, what you can do, though, is, if you're in London, gather outside the Royal Courts of Justice on the 20th and 21st. Here is some potential guests, right? Kathy Vogan, Kevin Gostola, Stephanie Marizzi, Craig Murray, Gabriel Shipton, Stella Assange, Murdoch Cadell, Halo Benson, D&V Free JA, right? George Galloway, Roger Waters, Credico Randy. So all your favorites are going to try to show up to this. Also, if you go to Misty's Twitter, there will be tweets suggesting you to call the DOJ, right? And their numbers are there for you, or just look up the numbers to the DOJ and give them a call. Definitely on these dates, which I'm sure Misty will do, and you will see those that day. But yeah, we got to put pressure again. And even then, that's a long shot. So, We got to do something though. So, but anyway, speaking of doing something, again, Kevin Gosztola, judge rules Assange visitors may sue CIA for allegedly violating privacy.
Didn't you report on something similar, if not exactly like this?
Well, it was they brought the suit up, and now the judge rules they can.
Okay.
Right. So
it's an update.
Yes. Okay. But I wanted to bring it up because another member of INN decided to sue the FBI. So for very similar overreach. So if you look up, Tara has an article in RT about how she's going to do that. So go look that up. But a federal judge ruled that 4 American attorneys and journalists who visited WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange while he was in the Ecuador embassy in London may sue the CIA for their role in the alleged copying of the contents of their electronic devices. Colin, have we not talked about what? Do you remember this? Copying the contents of electronic devices? What does that sound like? We're in the UK. You remember?
No,
little bird.
No, but
little birdie boy, little spooky bird. Phantom
Yeah.
parrot. You're getting there. Yep. So, so technically that's still illegal for us, right? Although the Patriot Act can make that a little fuzzy, right? But the Americans sufficiently alleged the CIA and Director Mike Pompeo through the Spanish security company UC Global and its director David Morales violated their reasonable expectation of privacy under the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution. Richard Roth, attorney for the 4 Americans, reacted, "We are thrilled that the court rejected the CIA's efforts to silence the plaintiffs, who merely seek to expose the CIA's attempt to carry out Pompeo's vendetta against WikiLeaks." In August 2022, 4 Americans sued the CIA and Pompeo. Margaret Ratner Kunstler, a civil rights activist and human rights attorney, Deborah Herbeck, a media lawyer who represented Assange, or WikiLeaks, journalist John Goetz, who worked for Der Spiegel when the German media organization first partnered with WikiLeaks, don't forget that, and journalist Charles Glass, who wrote articles on Assange for The Intercept. Right? Glass, Goetz, Herbeck, and Kunstler alleged that they were required to surrender their electronic to UC Global employees who were hired by the Ecuador government to provide security for the embassy. On June 4, the Spanish newspaper El País reported that Morales had a folder on his laptop marked CIA. Both UC Global and Morales were also sued by Glass, Goetz, Herbeck, and Kunstler. So the United States government moved to dismiss the claims against the CIA and Pompeo. Judge John Kotel of the U.S. District Court in the Southern District of New York granted several parts of the government's motion, but he refused to dismiss a claim related to allegations that the CIA copied their electronics and violated their privacy. So yes, Indy's in the chat saying we covered this story. We definitely did, but we covered it on How Do We Miss That? And this is essentially an update to that. In an April 2017 speech, Kotel noted Pompeo pledged that his office would embark upon a long-term campaign against WikiLeaks. The plaintiffs alleged that Pompeo and the CIA recruited Morales to conduct surveillance on Assange and his visitors at a January 2017 private security industry convention at the Las Vegas Sands Hotel in Las Vegas. Shortly after returning from the Las Vegas convention, Morales created an operations unit and improved UC Global systems to implement the alleged agreement with the CIA. Copying the contents of the plaintiff's electronic devices was part of this alleged agreement. Which, sure. Kotel added, additionally, the plaintiffs alleged that the data collected by UC Global was either personally delivered to Las Vegas and New York City by Morales, who traveled to these locations more than 60 times in the 3 years following the Las Vegas convention, or placed on a server that provided external access to the CIA. According to Kotel, whether Morales and UC Global were indeed acting as agents of Pompeo and the CIA is a question of fact that cannot be decided on a motion to dismiss. In this case, the misconduct alleged is violation of the plaintiff's reasonable expectation of privacy in the contents of their electronic devices under the Fourth Amendment. The government concedes that the plaintiffs had a right to privacy in the contents of their electronic devices. So that already might be a thing here, right? So at a November hearing, Kodal took an interest in the apparent fact that the government had not obtained a warrant to access the content of the attorneys or journalists' electronics, right? A prior decision in Amnesty versus Clapper, which challenged the legality of the bulk telephone metadata collection program operated by the NSA, helped Kodal determine that the alleged targeted Americans had standing to sue the CIA. Okay, so that's the new stuff, right? If the government's search of their conversations at electronic devices and seizure of the contents of the electronic devices were unlawful, the plaintiffs have suffered a concrete and particularized injury fairly traceable to the challenged program and redressable by a favorable ruling, Kodal declared. He also contended that the Americans did not have to demonstrate that the government planned to imminently use the information that they collected from their electronic devices. So it doesn't matter if they were going to use it or when, or if they were going to use it 3 months down the road. However, Kodal dismissed their additional claims against the CIA, one involving surveillance of the American attorneys and journalist conversations with Assange, one involving photographs of passports and devices that were allegedly taken, and one claim specifically against Pompeo in his individual capacity as a former official. Kodal agreed with the government that the alleged targeted Americans knew Assange was surveilled even before the CIA's alleged involvement. He considered it relevant that they did not indicate that they would not have met with Assange if they had known their conversations were under surveillance. So then it's okay to spy. If you knew where you're going to get spied on, like you knew we were going to do it and you did it anyway, right? That's on you then, right? That's what they're saying. So, since security personnel could have easily overheard their conversations, there was no reasonable expectation of privacy. He also sided with the government when it came to their argument that the Americans voluntarily handed their devices over to embassy security, so they assumed the risk that the passports and devices might be photographed by the government. Importantly, what Kodal ignored is the fact that those who visited Assange could not have known that the security company working at the Ecuador embassy had some kind of off-the-books relationship with the CIA to help the U.S. government target Assange. Assange was the editor-in-chief of WikiLeaks, a media organization that routinely performed acts of journalism. The publication of classified documents from the U.S. government upset military and security agency officials enough that they retaliated. That retaliation should not be so easily justified as being a part of protecting national security. Finally, in 1971, the U.S. Supreme Court case known as Bivens created a process for bringing cases against federal government officials for violating a person's constitutional rights. Pompeo was sued under that doctrine. Courts have been extremely reluctant to allow plaintiffs to pursue damages when a case may set a precedent or lead to a court intruding upon national security and foreign policy matters. This case was no different, as Kodal refused to allow the Americans to use Bivens to hold Pompeo accountable. The U.S. government, on behalf of the CIA, will likely appeal the decision. Nevertheless, it is a remarkable development because there is a distinct possibility that there may be a civil trial where CIA spying on Americans is challenged, and all while the U.S. government pushes forward with the unprecedented act of putting a publisher on trial for engaging in journalism. Colin, what's the upsides of civil trial? There is one I can think of.
So into the public.
Yeah. So they could have had this behind closed doors.
Right.
So now it might be public. That might backfire. Hopefully. I hope. Then again, they might know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So it could be, public heads on a spike in either direction. So Indy in the chat going, there's no way they're going to allow the CIA to go on trial publicly. They may not have an option. Like this might be the out they felt like they could take. You know? So yeah, I mean, get rid of the CIA would be nice. But yeah, please go follow Misty on the Twitters at Sarcasm Stardust to get up-to-date news on Assange when she puts that out. She's literally one of the best resources to me. So anything to add, Care Bear?
No, I mean I feel like I've known about Assange now just shy of 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
3?
Yep.
Yeah, 3. And no progress has been made, in terms of him being acquitted at all or anything like that.
He's been in limbo. They can add more limbo to this.
Right. And we have enough distractions right now. So, so no one's even talking about Assange really at this point. Yeah. Israel has kind of.
Yeah. Talk to your friends about him. Ask how many even know. I mean, I remember back in like during the first vault leaks from WikiLeaks. I remember Jon Stewart talking about it and, the double tap and I remember when all that stuff came out and it was fresh in people's mind and it lost Bush an election. Right. So, I mean, it lost the Republicans an election for sure. But yeah, I mean, I think it's only now a lot of liberals have woken back up after being put to sleep by a Democratic president again, and this is back on the table. And it's partially because elections are coming up.
Now, let us take a look at this clip with James Corbett on the World Health Organization.
W.H.O. And this month, I think we have some pretty good news and glad to tell it to you. Tomorrow, because this is being filmed about 4 days before it will be shown. So tomorrow, Wednesday, the 13th of December, there will be a hearing. So this will be the first hearing that Congress has conducted about the WHO and about these documents. And we don't know what's going to be in it. So you will know by the time this thing airs, but we've got some suggestions for Congress, what they might want to talk about and ask questions about. The first thing is that I went to Europe. Initially, I was supposed to speak at the parliaments of Croatia and of Romania in events that were organized by, first by the International COVID Summit #4 in Romania, and by a party, the Populist Party in Romania, which invited us and treated us very, very well. And we had a wonderful 2-day event there. And then later, about 10 days later, the Croatian Parliament, where we had another very good event, lots of media, and some overlapping people presented and some others. And members of the parliaments of both countries were very interested to find out what was going on at the WHO and were concerned. Some of the Romanians were interested in challenging the WHO and were wondering about which way to go about doing that, because there's several ways. So that happened. But then in between, I went to Estonia, Belgium, and Italy and met with parliamentarians in Estonia and in Italy who were also extremely interested in learning more of the details. I was in both countries with attorney Philip Kruse, who is a Swiss attorney who's been on this, for the last couple of years. And we tag teamed, talking about the medical, the political, the legal issues, and Philippe assisted members of some of the parliaments in writing letters to the WHO. And so anyway, congruent with our visits and following them, there were a number, which by the way, was right before this deadline for countries to officially reject the amendments that we thought had been passed by the World Health Assembly in May of 2022. And the deadline was you had 18 months to reject, according to the IHR rules. However, Philippe actually read or watched the video of the meeting where this vote supposedly took place and noticed that it wasn't really the World Health Assembly voting. There was no vote. It was actually a subcommittee, Committee A, and there was a consensus procedure where basically the person leading the meeting said, look, if there's no problems, it goes through, and then clapped his hands. Yay, it went through. And so nobody ever voted. Now, that is not within the WHO Constitution or the IHR regulations. So what happened? It looks like maybe there was a fraud that took place. And Philippe noticed this, and 12 members of the European Parliament wrote to the WHO on November 28th and said, please, within 48 hours, show us the evidence that there was actually a vote of the full World Health Assembly, which is the 194 nations that are party to the WHO. And no evidence was forthcoming in the 48 hours. And so then these 12 parliamentarians wrote back to the WHO and said, you know what? We declare your amendments from May of 2022 null and void. So that's the first, or that's one of the headaches that the WHO is now going to have to deal with. Meantime, after Philippe and I met with about half a dozen Estonian parliamentarians, 11 of them wrote to the WHO and said, hey, we don't think your procedures are proper either. And they said, look, our whole parliament has to, according to our constitution, the whole parliament has to decide on going forward with these negotiations, and our parliament never did. We had a subcommittee approve it, but we don't think it happened constitutionally for us. And this also gave the WHO heartburn, apparently, because shortly thereafter, the chairman of that particular committee wrote to the WHO and said, oh, no, we did everything right. Don't worry about this, forget about it. So clearly she wouldn't have written that letter if there wasn't a problem. So there's another constitutional problem. Then a member of the Parliament of Holland wrote a similar letter to the WHO saying, we think our parliament needed to approve, and it didn't. And then there were a flurry of letters from a parliamentarian or several in Mexico, in Philippines, in Germany, challenging the WHO on some of these procedural issues. In addition, what had happened was there were recent elections and a very new prime minister in New Zealand and in Slovakia. And both of them announced that they weren't going to go along with any WHO usurpation of sovereignty. Now, they didn't write a letter. They announced this in different, the Slovakian prime minister announced it in a speech, and the New Zealand, they have three parties that are in a coalition to rule New Zealand at the moment. So they've thrown out, not only is Jacinda Ardern, thrown across the Pacific to Harvard, where all rotting fish go to die, but even the person who followed her in her party, they're out, and now they've got the opposite parties are in power in New Zealand. So all of this is a reflection of a populist wave happening around the world. And there are lots of elections coming up during the first 6 months of 2024. And everyone is expecting this populist wave to continue. So anyway, the New Zealanders wrote a sort of a policy brief, an 11-page policy brief. And on page 10, they said, by December 1st, we're not going to go along with the WHO. Now, I've talked to my colleagues, my contacts in New Zealand, and nobody's aware that anything has happened since then. So it's now 12 days later, but we don't know what New Zealand is going to do, if anything. However, it was a shot across the bow. We're not going along. And so meantime, a lot of lawyers have been, so it was very good that we had this deadline of November 30th to reject the May 2022 amendments, because it focused everybody's minds. So a lot of lawyers from different countries came up with all sorts of interesting arguments about how this whole WHO process may not be legal.
Let me underline the real point of what you're saying here, which I think is extremely important to understand, is that essentially the WHO process that is going on right now, both with regards to the International Health Regulation Amendments and the treaty so-called, is a Potemkin village. And it's only as real as it appears to be, unless you actually look behind it and see, oh, wait, there's nothing propping this up. This is just a facade. And that is being exposed. Every time anyone actually questions what is the actual legal authority for this, they find out, oh my God, oh, there is none. So I honestly, truly believe that the entire facade could be collapsed if enough public attention was simply brought to bear on this issue and what's really happening. But let me summarize and underline what you're talking about there. There's a handy dandy summary that the World Council for Health put out on November 30th. So this isn't the latest information, but they have a good summary of various country positions and what's happening, in which they include that letter from the 11 members of Parliament rejecting the IHR amendments. Because, hey, that's not part of the parliamentary process here in Estonia. They do link to the New Zealand new coalition government reserving against proposed amendments to IHR. And I would suggest people actually go to health.govt.nz for amending the international health regulations, where they posted up their process and what's happening and why they're doing this. I have more to say on that in a second. They talk about Slovakia's prime minister, as you mentioned, announcing the government will not support strengthening the WHO. There's a comprehensive bill by a congressman in the Philippines that's gaining traction and public support. 2 South African parliamentarians have championed a WHO withdrawal bill. There's a parliamentarian in the Netherlands who filed a letter making reservation due to lack of due process, as you were mentioning there. 11 EU parliamentarians are formally challenging procedural failures in the IHR amendments. Bill HR 79 to defund and exit the WHO was introduced by U.S. Congressman Andy Biggs. Parliamentarians continue advocating to reject IHR amendments and question the WHO in Japan, where I am. And a letter from the Australian people communicates rejection of the WHO's proposed amendments to the IHR, linking to standupnowaustralia.com.au, which has an entire campaign that is garnered around getting public support behind this. With regards to the New Zealand government announcing its intention to do a national interest test to see if they will go along with the IHR amendments, I found that interesting. And of course, so how did the New Zealand mainstream press cover this? Well, you have onenews.co.nz. Coalition's WHO policy leaves public health expert baffled. Why? Why on earth would they reject these wonderful amendments? But there was an interesting paragraph in there that I want to get your take on, because I can't quite understand what they're saying. And as usual, it's mainstream news garbage, so they don't link to any sources. But they say the amendment, the IHR amendment from May of 2022, which, as you say, passed in that procedural vote that hopefully my viewers and hopefully your viewers have actually watched how that went forward. It was an absolute ridiculous joke with, I believe, the Japanese subcommittee chair or whatever he was, right, gaveling down. Right. Any objections? No? Okay, it's passed. And then he has to repeat it because everyone's fallen asleep. It's passed. Right. Yay. Yeah, let's all cheer. It's a ridiculous process. Anyway, that happened in May of 2022. And as you say, the countries had until November 30th to reject it, which is exactly what New Zealand did. And in this article, they're saying the amendment had been part of a larger suite of changes proposed by the United States in May last year, 2022, which was the subject of criticism for overreach in an international law blog. What blog? Are you going to link to it? No, of course not. But as the WHO's decisions show, only the change to timeframes was adopted. I don't know what that's indicating. I don't know what that means. I don't know what WHO decision they are specifically talking about there. I don't know. Are they saying that there was only a time frame change that was adopted as part of the larger package of US?
So yeah, so the United States had introduced 12 or 13 amendments and then withdrew most of them. But what was left was this change in the timing, which was to reduce the period of time during which a nation could reject future amendments from 18 months to 10 months. And the United States had wanted it to be 6 months. So it would remain within the Biden administration. They couldn't get that agreed to. So it became 10 months. And then reduce the period of time before the amendments came into force from 2 years to 1 year. So those amendments, those amendments were the ones that this Japanese head of the committee, being coached by an American Secretary of State person or HHS person, went through his little mumbo jumbo, dog and pony show. And clearly there was no vote, and yet there's supposed to be a vote, and it's supposed to be the entire World Health Assembly. So if there was no vote, it is null and void. And the luckily it was caught on video. There it is. We can see it.
Right.
And
as you say, let's stress that. So the point of that was so that they could change the time frame, so that if Biden doesn't win the 2024 selection, the next person can't undo what's been done, or at least so they say. But once again, the entire thing relies on countries voluntarily being part of the World Health Organization. And if you actually exited and defunded the WHO, all of this legal chicanery becomes null and void at a moment's notice. Part of that Potemkin village I was talking about.
Precisely. So just to expand on this, other lawyers have jumped into the act. So there's a lawyer from Spain who's brought a lot of cases about mandates, and won a case ending the mask mandate in Aragon, Spain. So this is Luis Maria Pardo, and he has challenged the WHO with a 4-page letter saying, what the amendments, we saw the amendments when they were first produced. We saw them in February when they had been harmonized in an initial way, and then we haven't seen anything subsequent, even though there have been many meetings of 2 different groups to work on them and try to negotiate something that is palatable to at least half the members. But we've seen nothing about that. So a Swedish member of parliament has challenged her health minister to either make those negotiations transparent or resign. Meanwhile, I thought each nation was negotiating this, but it turns out that the EU itself has certain what it calls competencies. And when the EU has a competency, then it can do the negotiations for its member nations, 27 member nations. So so it has been negotiating for multiple member states, but the EU is not a party to the WHO. So does it have the legal authority to negotiate if it's not a party? One question. Another question, have the nations, does the EU actually have a sufficient competency in public health? That's very questionable. That's not one of its strong areas of competence. So it may not have the legal authority to negotiate for member nations around health issues. Just as in the United States, we've challenged the government also. Wait a minute, according to the Constitution, health goes to the states. How can the federal government be negotiating health sovereignty away when they don't have authority to do so? That falls in the states. So it's a similar deal. Attorney Pardo also said, look, you need to tell us what amendments were proposed and which ones have been rejected, which is a really good question. Like, what have you been doing in the back room? What did you really want? What did you want, but you weren't able to get, what's left, etc. And asking, which nations have given you the authority to negotiate away their sovereignty? And how did that happen? So another very good question. Another issue is, does the WHO Constitution actually allow it to take on a role of governance? It was set up as an advisory body. Now, all of a sudden, it wants to be a governing body. did the nations give it that authority initially? Nobody is able to find that. What's the legal argument? Let me just mention a couple of things that I don't think we've discussed enough in the past. So one of them is that the treaty and I've got a new mem, triple surveillance, okay? What these documents do is give your nation or the obligation to perform triple surveillance on you. So one is surveillance of your social media. Anything you type on a computer, it's going to be surveilling and censoring. That's number one. Number two, it wants to stick a swab up your nose anytime it wishes, as well as your pets, wild animals, livestock, the environment. Okay. And thirdly, it is going to perform surveillance of your medical records and share them with the WHO. So that's also in these documents. Triple surveillance. In the US, that's unconstitutional. We do have something called privacy. We have a Fourth Amendment that says you can't just go in and steal my information without due cause, without a warrant, without proving that you have a reason to come in and surveil my information, as well as my nose, as well as which is also a collection of your DNA. So I think they want your DNA also. There's the blank check issue.
I really want to get into this. This is important.
Yeah, so questions are going to be asked tomorrow about 3 U.S. officials that are involved with these negotiations and with the WHO. And so a question I have suggested is to ask the negotiators, would you sign a blank check to an organization that has no accountability? And if not, why are you willing to sign a blank check for the United States to give to an unaccountable organization? I don't want you signing my money or my rights away. So Lois Pace is a woman in HHS who has been the primary negotiator on this. She is the one who put forward the May 2022 amendments. Then there's a guy called John Nkongasong or something like that, who is a Cameroonian US person who is a total globalist. He is on the board of CEPI. He has worked at the WHO. He's worked at the CDC. He's worked at CDC Africa. He's worked at UNAIDS, and anyway, he does what the globalists want in terms of public health. So that's him. And then the third person is an interesting person, Atul Gawanda. He's a physician, an endocrine surgeon who worked at Harvard as a professor and wrote beautiful articles for the New Yorker about very interesting and smart medical issues. And he did that for years, and somehow he got into big business. So he was hired to do something for Google, and now he has his own company and blah, blah. So he's sort of out of the surgical field, and he's now into public health and business. And of course, public-private partnerships are what the WHO and all of this is about. So he is now working for USAID, and I wonder if he knows that it's a cutout for the CIA. He may or may not, but he was a good guy, and now he's going to be answering questions for Congress, and he's really pretty new to this whole business.
Can I get to the blank check issue for a minute? Because I think this is extremely important, and I don't think enough people are aware of this or appreciate what's going on here. So let's draw that out in the most recent text, whatever they call it, the proposal for negotiating text of the WHO pandemic agreement, the Halloween surprise they dropped on us at the end of October. I want people at the very least, please just read through it. It's 30 pages. You can get through it in not too much time, but at the very least, look at Article 21, because this is the blank check. And I'm glad you've brought up that term, because that's probably the best way to understand this. It's conference of the parties, as in they are going to create a conference of the parties that will meet at some, maybe annually or semi-annually or whatever they decide, to continue to essentially make new rules up on the spot as they deem fit. And whatever lack of say that we, the average person, has in the negotiation of these documents will have even less say over what is being decided at this conference of the parties. And if conference of the parties sounds familiar, I hope it does, because of course, everyone probably has heard of it in reference to the UNFCCC, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which has its COP every year. And we're on COP 28. Is that what's going on right now in Dubai? At any rate, it is essentially de facto an arm, a chamber of world government that already exists and is already functioning. It's just you never got the memo because they never wanted you to get that particular memo. But what this is when you have one of these gigantic conventions that's signed on to by multiple countries or most of the world, as in the case of the UNFCCC and potentially this WHO agreement, you have this conference of the parties where every year or whatever they decide, they get together to essentially make up new rules, new binding obligations, or what they deem to be binding obligations, thereby creating essentially a form of global government that people don't recognize. And I hope people understand, and it's not just the UNFCCC, it's not just the WHO that's trying to create this. There are multiple COPs that exist right now for all sorts of different conventions. And I've listed some of them in an article that I wrote called "This is How Global Government is Run and What's Coming Next," where I try to raise the alarm about this Conference of the Parties and this blank check that it indicates, because exactly as that image will hopefully foster in people's minds, what you are doing with regards to if your country signs on to this agreement, as at least as we see it in this proposal text, it doesn't even matter to some extent what is said in the document. What matters is what the Conference of the Parties decides next year or the next year or the next year. It will happen on a regular cycle that they will just continue adding and changing and amending and making new rules as they see fit. And you will have no possible ability to hold anyone involved in this process accountable any more than you can hold someone in the UNFCCC process accountable. Who from the United States is there representing you at the UNFCCC, and who gets to decide what they're negotiating with regards to that? Does anyone out there know? Probably not. Well, you'll know even less about the WHO when they get their COP in place, if that's what's going to happen this May. So yet another reason why some sort of half measure or, oh, maybe we'll just put a reservation on this is not going to go far enough. We really do have to exit completely the WHO and stop this stupid charade from going any further. But that's a good reason for people to start looking into this. Article 21 of the proposal text on Conference of the Parties. That's the blank check. And it doesn't matter what else is in that document. That's how they're going to continue rewriting that document in the future.
Was actually called Nicole Junkerman, the IDF-linked Bond girl infiltrating the UK NHS. Originally published on vocal.media, this heavily censored article was the first part of a trilogy investigating Nicole Junkerman and examining her links with Jeffrey Epstein, Israeli intelligence, and the UK NHS Health Tech Advisory Board, led by UK Health Secretary Matt Hancock MP. This article was eventually pulled down and censored by vocal.media. And there she is, Nicole Junkerman there. Now, this is from a public site, this picture, but this is one of the tools she uses to censor. She tries to say that that image is copyrighted. Yeah, it's not copyrighted at all. It comes from a public site. This is a news article, and it's been changed in a certain way. That means it isn't, but it's one of the ways that she does or has in the past. I don't think that will be an easy sell for her eventually, but it's one of the many different ways. Other than that, she's just tried every way to have me pulled offline. What she does, I mean, I'm not going to, but I do have her phone number. She doesn't know that. I could phone her up and say, "Will you stop censoring me, woman?" But I decide not to. And there she is. The Epstein associate, nobody's talking about, the IDF-linked Bond girl infiltrating the UK NHS. FIFA corruption, the Panama Papers, and the Mossad by Johnny Vedmore. And so here it is. Let's do a read through of possibly one of the most important articles to my career in writing, because this was the first time. So I do apologize if it's clunky in the way it reads, because this was I've had a lot of practice since then, so I'm getting better. I have no qualifications in English. English language, I got 2 Ds in or an E, and I never did any other type of English. So this is all just I ended up having to learn as I go along. I have a story to tell you. A story that causes my heart to pound and my blood pressure to rise as I type each and every word. A true story of a woman of great wealth and power who rode on Jeffrey Epstein's Lolita Express private jet on several occasions. She appears to be a German-born Israeli state intelligence operative based in London, an ex-model whose name appears in the Panama Papers from the Mossack Fonseca leaks, and who became embroiled in a FIFA corruption scandal with Sepp Blatter and his family. She is perhaps the closest example you could possibly find to a real-life Bond girl. Yet she is almost completely unknown to the majority of us. Oh. This lady has recently infiltrated the NHS through the UK Department of Health and Social Care with the help of Matt Hancock MP, and her presence signifies a major threat to the data security of every citizen of the United Kingdom. Every single piece of data about you, your health issues, your blood type, the model of your wireless pacemaker keeping you alive, every detail of every embarrassing medical problem in the hands of the Israeli state apparatus and potentially sold off to the highest bidder. You may think that this doesn't concern you. Why would you need to worry about a foreign far-right government who have been proven to meddle in the affairs of our country? Your data would be useless to them, surely. But that's not the world we live in anymore. Big data is the modern gold rush. The psychologists and marketing agents have mastered how to make you buy things. The next step is for them to successfully master making you do things. And for that kind of control over people, they need everybody's data. When I was first researching the Jeffrey Epstein case, I trawled through every piece of the official documentation that was available. I knew what I was looking for and how very dangerous it was. I had begun attempting to identify state assets through their movements, actions, associations, and by good old-fashioned detective work. I was interested in identifying any MI5 or MI6 agents, Israeli Mossad, CIA, or any other part of a nation-state's spying apparatus. It's possibly one of the most dangerous hobbies on earth, spy hunting. And if I'm honest, I'm not even sure why I'm doing it. Regardless, Jeffrey Epstein's sweetheart deal was probably what they would give a foreign intelligence operative. Epstein was it was a perfect place to begin fishing for potential spooks. Of course, everybody knows now that from my own research, I believe fully that Epstein was running the East Coast for the CIA, and he was an interlocutor between foreign state assets who wanted to do any type of work on the CIA's US domestically and the CIA soil. So they had to go through Epstein, one of the very rare CIA fixes right at the top. That's like Pottinger, Epstein, Hunter Biden, others. Once I find somebody who I suspect of being involved in espionage, I will track down all existing information on that individual and build the story of their lives as best I can. I learn every known habit they have, and instead of immediately writing an article about them, I just continue to note their activities with interest. I have been watching many potential state actors for a fair few years. I've also missed out on breaking a few good stories by waiting too long. But I don't want to simply show you the past as much as I want to show you the present and even possibly the future. Investigation Manifest. The Epstein Flight Manifest reveals the Junkerman connection to the people trafficking paedophile. There you go. There's a picture. Nicole Junkerman and Jeffrey Epstein riding alone. And that's from Paris to Birmingham, and then Birmingham to Paris. August 31st, they leave. Arrive back September the 2nd, staying on September the 1st at Foxcote House. Right. Just going to drink. In the Epstein case, one of the best pieces of evidence which we have available to research, which was available to researchers, was the flight manifest for this child trafficking molestation machine. There were many coded initials and a few famous names noted in the official documentation. As you probably already know, Bill Clinton and his Secret Service agents had ridden the infamous Lolita Express on many occasions. Naomi Campbell, Kevin Spacey, Alan Dershowitz, and Chris Tucker also flew on the plane with the billionaire sex offender. We all build up recognizable patterns of behavior over time. When you investigate someone, you usually start by identifying these patterns and then looking for any divergences from the anticipated outcomes. In Epstein's plane's flight manifest, a pattern which was visible from the information available is how he would use his private jet. He would use the plane for two main reasons. Most commonly, he would fly himself and a number of his entourage to a destination, or alternatively, he would fly people to meet him. The rarest occurrence was when Epstein would fly without any of his usual entourage and just one other passenger. There was only one name that jumped out from the flight manifest as a good example of when Epstein alternated from his routine, his second meeting with Nicole Junkerman. As of 2019, Nicole Junkerman's current business portfolio is very impressive. She's often described as an ex-model, entrepreneur, and investor, but Miss Junkerman is much more than just what you see at first glance. Born in Dusseldorf, Germany, on the 27th of April, 1975, Nicole Junkerman studied business administration at the International University of Monaco, and then went on to study management development at the prestigious Harvard Business School in the United States. Among her many talents, she is multilingual and can speak German, English, French, Italian, and Spanish. In 1998, after graduating from the University of Monaco, she co-founded Winamax, which was an early online gaming platform that existed before online gaming regulations became a priority for the authorities. Winamax was sold in 2001, and Junkerman would go on to invest in a recently created media rights company called Infront Sports and Media AG, where she would soon serve as vice chairman of the board of directors. Is the then president and chief executive of Infront Sports Media, Philip Blatter. In 2002, Junkerman acquired the rights for the 2006 FIFA World Cup in Germany with her relatively new company, Infront Sports Media. The company was best known at this time for its president and chief executive, Philip Blatter, the nephew of Sepp Blatter, the then president of FIFA. This overt corrupt nepotism left Junkerman's Infront Sports and Media as a company to market the TV rights to future major FIFA tournaments. The company went on to acquire the rights of all FIFA World Cups, and even though this deal was watered down in 2006, in 2011, FIFA again gave Infront permission to sell TV rights in the Asian markets for 2018 and 2022 World Cups. During her time at Infront Sports Media, Junkerman would be caught flying on Jeffrey Epstein's Lolita Express on 3 occasions. The first flight recorded on the 22nd of March 2002, she would share with Epstein, Sean Koo, and one other passenger. But it's her second trip which really stands out. On Saturday, the 31st of August 2002, Jeffrey Epstein and Nicole Junkerman would fly from Paris-Le Bourget Airport to Birmingham Airport in the UK alone. They would return to Paris via the same route on Monday, the 2nd of September 2002. For Jeffrey Epstein to fly without any of his normally present entourage is very unusual. So what was happening that weekend? I've done a lot of research on these dates, but as of yet, I do not have answers. I do. I found the answers the next month in actual fact. At that time, Junkerman was 27 years old, so it's very unlikely that they were dating, as everyone knows Jeffrey Epstein isn't interested in fully sexually developed adults. Finding this anomaly on Epstein's plane's manifest encouraged me to look deeper into the life of Nicole Junkerman, and amongst other things, whether or not she had any links to the state intelligence agency. Were Junkerman and Epstein meeting alone for innocent reasons? Even though Junkerman had made many investments already, she might have been trying to get more funds from eager investors like Epstein. How Epstein originally accrued his billions is still quite a murky subject in itself. Whatever the reasons for these two incredibly rich people being together, this meeting was a very private one. Junkerman had also just completed Harvard University's program for management development, and Jeffrey Epstein had a high-profile relationship with Harvard, which in 2003 led him to donating money to the Ivy League college, while stating that he had given the school $30 million in funding, a claim later revealed to be false. Was Epstein using the famous American college to recruit for his own businesses or other interests? More Epstein later. But firstly, continuing with Junkerman's career, in 2005, she founded a private equity fund focused on media and sports investment in Asia and Europe called United in Sports. Sorry about that. Called United in Sports, and managed to raise $242.2 million for the venture in 2007. Her other project, Infront Sports and Media, was ultimately sold to a private European equity firm, Bridgepoint, for $600 million in 2011. Now, I've actually, just a note, I've actually talked to Dave Whelan. He appeared on the podcast, Newspace podcast, to talk about his book on the assassination of Jeffrey Epstein, the assassination of John Lennon. And if you watch that, he might mention it on there, but he did tell me that he was actually at Infront Sports and Media. He actually worked there right at the start, recruited, and he said everybody knew it was a scam straight away. So I'm going to have him on the Newspace podcast to learn about that later on. In that year, Nicole Junkerman had officially become one of the hottest investors in the world. Since the very first acquisition, which I've already referred to, Junkerman has invested in or purchased Shanghai Really Sports, Ziggurat, Thousand Child, Aloha, Jobio, Emoticast, LV, Auctionata, CoinDrum, Spoon Guru, Optiopay, Grabio, Magnum Global Ventures, Songza, Towson Kind, Revolut, Sentient Technologies, Here Be Dragons, Soundtrack Your Brand, Grok, Catapult, Delivery Club, Relate IQ, Dollar Shave Club, Brewhouse Brewery, Cage Warriors, Eagle Alpha, Goxic XX, Rebuy.de, Travelbird, Health Tech Digital, Okrin, and Reporty Homeland Security, which would become Carbine 911. The last four of these aforementioned companies are of significant interest. Oh, yes, they are. The intelligence connection. Look at this board of directors. Look at this board of directors. Ehud Barak. Oh, Emir Elikai, Alex Dizengov, Pinchas Bukris. If once you work out who Pinchas Bukris is, you're just like slapping your head. All of these guys, and Nicole Junkerman. So this was the original team. Look at them. Look at them. They coming out of the shadows, looking like evil. Yeah, they've all had these pictures taken. The original Carbine 911 board with Junkerman and her Israeli unit. 8,200 co-founders replaced by neocons after this article. After this article, they had to change their entire board. I'm not surprised Junkerman started paying people masses of money to censor me. So it's really causing a lot of businesses problems. The link between Nicole Junkerman, the Israeli State Intelligence Services, and the Israeli Defense Force is not a tenuous one. The ominously named Reporty Homeland Security was the first incarnation of what has now been rebranded Carbine 911 and is referred to as simply Carbine. Described as global leader in public safety technology, Carbine is a call handling platform app that allows you to, amongst other things, stream any ongoing emergency directly to the responding emergency services. It claims, in the information section of the promotional video on YouTube entitled Nicole Junkerman Presents Carbine, that it will provide a plug-and-play solution that allows 911 callers to connect their smartphone features to emergency operator so they can so that the operator can make a better assessment of the emergency. Location data, audio, camera, and video access can be shared, providing the operator with a greater detail on the situation. The use of Carbine's solution will allow emergency management teams to better triage their cases and improve the utilization of downstream emergency services. They promise to combine the use of personal data, location data, live video, data from surrounding wearable tech, and even information from parked smart cars to deliver more information to the emergency services who should be responding. They can pinpoint your location, even indoors, to within 3 feet, and they claim that they can even collect data from dropped calls. However, they fail to mention how they'll get the permission to use such masses of available data. Who are these angels behind this revolutionary technology which aims to get between a victim and the emergency services? One of the directors of Carbine is Nicole Junkerman. The chairman of the board of directors is Ehud Barak, the 10th Prime Minister of Israel and the 14th Chief of Staff of the Israeli Defense Force, former Minister of Defense and former head of military intelligence for Israel. Ehud Barak had a long history with one of the most public faces of Israeli covert operations. Before he was Prime Minister, Ehud Barak was a big name in the IDF. Through the 1970s, he led many operations, including famously disguised himself as a woman to kill members of the PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization. Ehud Barak has already been linked with Epstein, and Benjamin Netanyahu has helped to highlight those links for his own political gain. Here she is on the website, Nicole Junkerman appearing from the shadows in the shoot. There's Ehud Barak. He's there too. 10th Prime Minister, tells you on there, 10th Prime Minister of Israel. Oh, look, cybersecurity, homeland security. Original chairman, so founder and CEO Amir Elikai says there, you can't help but to notice that there's a few links here and there to big people. We'll talk about that now, because of course Alex Dizengoff used to work for the Israeli Prime Minister as well, co-founder and tech lead Alex Dizengoff. Amazing. Junkerman's infiltration of the UK NHS and its big data. Oh, this led on to other articles. Let's just look at this a second. Now, there's a couple of people here that's of note. She's a Tory government advisor. He's the head of Oakwin. He's pretty popular. This guy's running for mayor of London now, Daniel Korski. I've written an article called Daniel Korski about him. He's a character, obviously an agent of some sort. Ben Goldacre is his name. He's one of the many fronts they put up in these medical situations. And there's Matt Hancock. And of course, some of these people probably don't know that they're riddled with spies here, that some of these guys are spies. I watched Nicole Junkerman carefully as she was buying up many startup tech firms, and at the end of 2018, my worst possible fear was realized. Matt Hancock, Member of Parliament for West Sussex and Secretary of State for Health and Social Care in the UK, appointed Nicole Junkerman to the Health Tech Advisory Board. For the vast majority of people living in the United Kingdom, the NHS is an institution which we cherish and adore. Many of us will protect the National Health Service with our lives, because of what it's done for us in our darkest days. So it's such a shame a year later and we'd have COVID properly kicking off and the NHS would be sold on every level in all different types of way, would sell out in all different types of way, ruined now to what it used to be. The Health Tech Advisory Board is described as a collection of clinicians, academics, and IT experts. The official government website says the board will look at how the NHS can harness the potential of technology and create a culture of innovation, with the aim of improving patient outcomes and reducing the workload on NHS staff. It fails to mention why it requires an Israeli intelligence-linked venture capitalist who has been involved with multiple scandals. Their first official meeting took place on the 19th of November 2018. See Appendix 1 for the other members of the Health Tech Advisory Board. The two members which are of note related to this article are Nicole Junkerman and Parker Moss. The latter happening to be the Chief Business Officer at Oakwin, which is one of many companies in Junkerman's vast portfolio. Oakwin is an AI startup that uses machine learning to augment medical and biological research. On its own, the company would probably be a perfect fit for the future of the NHS, but because of its connections to Nicole Junkerman in the Israeli intelligence, Okin should be seen as too much of a risk to the data protection for NHS users. Yeah, and JF Holdings and Nicole Junkerman Financial Holdings or Finance. A London hospital could offer patient data to Google-backed AI startup in bid to develop better drugs. NGF Holding website announces NHS big data win. So they'd just be sifting up all your data. Which in Britain is everybody's on the NHS. Whether they like it or not. On June 16, 2019, Nicole Junkerman's NJF Holdings website issued an article originally published in the Telegraph under the title, London Hospitals Could Offer Patient Data to Google-backed AI Startup in a Bid to Develop Better Drugs. It was exactly as I had expected. The convoluted title was celebrating the fact that Okin had already been promised NHS patient data, and they're already confidently announcing it to their investors and to other associates. We need to call for Matt Hancock to remove Nicole Junkerman from the Health Tech Advisory Board as of immediate effect, and we should have an inquiry into how the NHS data can be protected from hostile foreign intelligence agencies. Junkerman and Epstein conclusions. I believe that the future unsealing of previously hidden evidence will confirm that Jeffrey Epstein had been working for multiple intelligence agencies. Yes, he had. But he is most likely to have been recruited by the Israeli state. I don't even believe that myself anymore. Junkerman has managed to avoid her connections with Epstein being out in the open until now, but she is skilled at controlling her public profile. Nicole Junkerman has become more powerful over the past 8 years than I have seen, and I have seen negative information relating to her previous scandals be removed from search results. Go check yourself. Type in Nicole Junkerman on Google search and go through all the articles which appear. They are overwhelmingly positive or simply relate to one of her businesses, and this is very different to what you would have found only a few years ago. When I first started investigating Nicole Junkerman, there were many negative articles which have all vanished. I'm not even sure that this story will survive, and I was bloody right about that. I mean, 3 different websites have had it now, and I do think that the one website is on before is at risk as well, just because I know what's going to happen to it. Appendix 1. The other Health Tech Advisory Board members include Rachel Dunscombe, who was the CEO of NHS Digital Academy and Director for Digital in Salford Royal NHS Group, but since has been appointed to the Health Tech Advisory Board. She has also joined Class Arc Collaborative as their global non-US leader and senior tech evangelist. That's an important role. Tech evangelists work out what technology needs to be created for their technology to be created. So they go to other companies and try and convince them to create it, and then et cetera, et cetera. Manoj Badali, OBE, who is described as a digital venture builder and has business ties with the Murdoch family. David Gann, CBE, Vice President of Innovation at Imperial College London, suspicious. Sir Mark Walport, an English medical scientist and former Chief Government Scientific Advisor to UK Conservative governments from 2013 until 2017. Nicola Blackwood, the Baroness of North Oxford and member of House of Lords. Roger Taylor, not a member of Queen, who is the chair of the Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation. Oh, how dystopian are some of these names. Jenny Tennyson, OBE, Chief Executive Officer at Open Data Institute and lead developer for legislation.gov.uk. Dan Sheldon, who is the head of Well Digital. Daniel Korsky, CBE, former advisor to David Cameron and Hamid Karzai's government, and is someone who deserves their own article. You see, I've linked it in there now. Michelle Brennan, president of Johnson & Johnson, one of the pharmaceutical heavyweights. Yeah, head of Johnson & Johnson's in there. P.S. Since writing this article in the summer of 2019, Nicole Junkerman has used various continental European courts to have my content pulled down and censored. She's using a regional Berlin court to silence the article and has tried to have me pay her legal fees for her Orwellian actions. Junkerman has used courts to pull down interviews I gave on this subject to Ed Operman, Jason Bamas, and Tony Goslin, amongst many others now. Her actions regarding this article led me to write 2 more articles that formed the Junkerman trilogy.
Now, we have a clip from the Union of the Unwanted's last episode of 2023.
Message is not, the content is not. And I want to remind people, what did Elon say? You will have freedom of speech, but you will not have freedom of reach. Where did he get that line from? It's from the Anti-Defamation League. When Sacha Baron Cohen said it in 2019, when he's pretending to put the Silicon Six in line and tisk at them. But meanwhile, ADL is working with Google. So he took that line and regurgitated it. So where did he get it from? And now he's suing the ADL? To me, it's just, that's the black pill for me. It's just a show. It's a Truman Show.
Go ahead, Keith. Jump in.
Oh, okay. You guys are all great. I love you. Sorry I came in late. Oh my God. Okay. Anyway, do I sound like a robot? My mic did last time. I'm good. I'm not a robot. Okay. Okay. The Jesuit perspective is to not necessarily care what people's beliefs are. It's about getting them to commit to their beliefs. Once you commit to your beliefs, then it's an emotional investment and you're easily maneuvered on the basis of that. If you look at what the algorithm disproportionately caters to, it's the people who are a juxtapositive mirror for the things that are put before us, not necessarily the people who have the courage to become creators and say, oh no, we're not simply going to comment on the issue of the day. We're going to go out there and coordinate things, create real world solutions, and implement them in real time. That's the thing. The less in which you comment on the news and the more in which you say something akin to the idea of, hey, every person who's listening to this right now, go around your block, knock on doors, meet your neighbors, and say this. 95% of the media is owned by the same 6 corporations. They're all billionaires. Are you a billionaire? Because I'm not either. Maybe we should be talking to each other. We do that kind of thing. You get shadow banned. You go out there and you talk about whatever the man is telling you to talk about. You're following it at the Jesuit model.
And I think one thing you hit on, Tease, in your last podcast, Conspiracy Synergy, go check it out. You talked about culture. I think Sam talked about it slightly, a little bit too, controlling the culture. That's why I clipped that part of your podcast and shared it, because I think culture is really important. That book Chaos, which I think is what the one that Sam was referring to about how they controlled the hippie movement and all this stuff. Culture is how you control people. You get people to, you can sway them in one direction or another. It's very similar to Edward Bernays. We all know Edward Bernays. I mean, it's controlling you without knowing you're being controlled. It's controlling your subconscious. It's controlling, it's engineering without knowing you're being engineered, and controlling the culture. And I think with Twitter, it could be a part of that. Like, obviously you can control narratives, you can control, but I see it over and over again. Like when Rumble first came along, everybody's like, fuck Rumble, it's owned by this, it's owned by that. I'm like, well, they're letting me post shit that I couldn't post anywhere else. So I'm not going to just like boycott them, or bash everything that they do just because maybe there is, examples of, censorship or whatnot. I think voting the least of 2 evils is dumb, but I think when it comes down to like big tech, like sometimes using the least of 2 evils isn't the worst thing. Like we have to put our message somewhere. We have to attempt
go where you want it.
Well, yes, but these places like Twitter, like Rumble, sometimes they can become echo chambers, but you still have to use every possible tool out there to reach people and put these conversations out there.
You're so freaking spot on. Exactly it. It is there to incite the argument between us so that we go in the direction that they go to us. And that's all it is. It's bait, and we're fish biting it, getting our cheeks ripped out over and over again, pretending that we're smiling so we don't have to see what's been foisted on us. So here's the thing. The alternative media
is a load of sperm going into a wood chipper because we have been goaded into caring more about entertainment than we care about principle. Does any motherfucker stepping up to the stage of president ever talk about the precedent that the United States is just a corporation, that the very existence of government itself is the continuation of slavery? Until that's the conversation that they and every other person in the country is having, we're just buying into the bullshit that they've been shoveling. And that's the situation we're in.
I agree with that. Here's my thing. It's because, and I will always, have hope. Again, when you see tinfoil hat gone, just know I've gone full black pill and I'm crying in the corner. I will never give out. But
before you do that, call me dumbass. That's not going to happen. We're not going to let that occur.
But my point is this: like they got us focusing so much on the federal. Okay, like. The key is local, man. The internet took our eye off of all the local shit. We're so worried about what's happening in Washington, D.C. We stopped watching our school boards. We stopped watching our city councils. And that's where the change can happen. In Michigan, this county wanted to let a Chinese factory in. The town voted them all out and locked the doors. That is their worst nightmare. That's what we have to do.
That, my friend, is happening in more places than you realize.
It is.
Yes, we need to bring back the Agenda 21 counteraction that stopped when Trump got elected.
Just to demonstrate how important local politics is, Trump, he tried to withdraw from Syria, and the generals just lied to him. And I think that the reality is that the presidential races, most federal races, are pure veneer. It's almost entirely irrelevant. The only thing that the reason that they make such a big deal about Trump, though, is that he will delay some of their plans. He won't just greenlight everything that they want, but they still get everything done. It's still like all of the wars they want, they will still get. All of the bailout funds, they'll still get. The mandates, the vaccines, the lockdowns, they'll still get everything that they want, no matter who's in charge. So yeah, I try not to focus as much on the federal level politics, but it's like that's what the conversation is. That's what everyone wants to hear about. So you do get sucked into it periodically.
Have you guys met your neighbors? I'd much rather talk to y'all than talk to my neighbors. My neighbors are full of shit. They're a pain in the ass, so I can trade them a little homemade blackberry compote for the lemons and have a chit chat conversation about the weather. But you want to talk about Fauci? You want to talk about gain of function? It ain't going to happen. You want to talk about the BLM sign in their yard? It ain't going to happen. So no, I'm not. I want to talk to you guys. I don't want to talk to my neighbors.
It really look. I've been through this since right before the lockdowns. The way we've handled it is we try to talk to them about it. They reject it, but then we engage them in other ways. So we tighten the relationship. And as things happen, we actually do get them to change their minds on things.
Well,
I've seen it.
I live in North Miami, which is a largely Jewish community, and there is no friendly conversation to be had about the Israel-Palestine shit. I don't even try. Plus, most of them are elderly, so they're like all rocking mass and totally in the COVID regime. It's rough. It's rough out here, but I still try and tell the truth if they want to have a conversation in the elevator.
I think, honestly, man, I know it's kind of crazy because our job, we go out there and we try to spread the knowledge as best we can. Okay. But I'm just telling you, man, I'm done trying to convince anybody. I actually go on these comedy podcasts going, I don't even want to talk about any conspiracies because you're all going to shut down and be quiet anyways. Let's talk about Black YouTube and dating and feminists and all that crazy stuff that gets all the big clicks because you're just going to get quiet on me. I am so done trying to convince anybody of anything. If at this point, after what you've been through the last 5 years, you don't think something's up, there's nothing I'm going to tell you that's going to help you. I like, dude, it's like, I totally get that. Like, man, I remember when the show started, Tinfoil Hat, like, I just was like, in that Pizzagate's real, all this, and then they would put hands on me. People and I'm like, what am I doing? Like I don't have any friends now. It's like, forget that. I'm not going to tell them anything. You want to take the jab and push censorship and get spied on? You do that, because I want nothing to do with that. I'm going to find a militia of people who understand what I'm about. I'm going to run with them, learn to shoot guns, buy gold, fucking do jujitsu, and that's what I'm going to do. And
is this your announcement that you're ending the show with Brian Callen?
Well, it will never end. Even if Brian goes away here and there, he's just been taking too many L's. Too many L's. I'm trying.
Man, I don't. He should be walking around punch drunk at this point. The way you beat him up every week.
But if Brian's actually a pretty good example of someone who, like, Sam will give him so much information, and if you watch each episode, you're like, this is going to sink in eventually. And if you don't watch listen to the archives, you would think he's never been exposed to any of this information, because it's like every episode it's like starting all over again. And I'm just like, how does Sam keep his cool? Which he doesn't sometimes, and that's kind of the fun of it all. But it's there are people like that. He's a perfect example of many people in the world. I mean, Charlie and I have talked about Dennis McKenna, the brother of Terrence McKenna. When I had him on my podcast, he's all about understanding how big pharma is trying to keep us away from natural plants and medicines and all the corruption in the world. But you get him talking about politics, he's just an old school liberal that thinks every Republican is bad. I had the same problem with Robert Lustig, who did that viral video, The Bitter Truth. He came on, talked about, big food, big pharma, all this stuff. Like, you figure, okay, can't be that hard to connect the dots with the vaccines. At the very end of the episode, I don't know how it got brought up. Yeah, great book, Chaos.
Talk to this guy, bro. He will not get into anything going on today. He refuses to admit it.
Yeah, I've tried to get him on my show quite a few times, and but same thing with Dr. Robert Lustig. Did a whole hour show about the corruption and all the issues with big pharma. At the very end, the vaccine gets brought up, and he's like, "Yeah, you should get the vaccine." And then we butt heads, and I'm like, What do you talk? Like, I couldn't even understand how we can have a full hour just dissecting all the details of how corrupt the FDA is and big pharma and big food, and then all of a sudden, like, you believe the vaccine narrative. And it was just like, there are just some people that are like that. I've talked to people in my personal life that are like that, where like they're open-minded with so many issues and topics. And then there's that one issue and topic. For some reason, they become the most closed-minded person on earth. And it could be many reasons. It could be because of their upbringing, some trauma they're dealing with. Could be, and I think even with Robert Kennedy Jr., it could be an example of one of those things. I don't know why he's so concrete and closed-minded about that one topic. But he just
what I've seen is, especially with the vaccine narrative and COVID, is that there's this investment, not money, but this investment of mental capital that if they go that far, they have to give up that investment. So there's some people who went really far, but they haven't went far enough yet.
Yeah,
and it's because they won't give up on that. Go ahead.
Being pot committed.
Yeah. And we should also remember that people come to this information on their own schedule, and the way somebody feels is the way they feel now. But that doesn't mean that's the way they'll feel forever. And I approach this with, this is what I believe now based on the information I have now. But if I'm presented with better information in the future, I want to allow myself the flexibility to change my mind on some things.
Sure.
Right?
My greatest...
I think that sounds reasonable. And if you don't want to be like super wrong, of course, but like you go, oh shit, well, I didn't know that. And yeah, that changes. If you're open to that, I think you go a long way. I think the way we started off this conversation is the way we'll end it, which is we were talking about the impact that we were having on reaching normies and having them start to ask questions about sort of where things are. Like, hey man, I have some questions for once in my life, and that's a great feeling. And that we're actually able to reach out and connect with some people that might not have ever come to this information if it wasn't for us. And then think about how that spreads, and think about how you dealt with that the first time you came across this information. Some people go, no thanks, and other people go, holy shit, oh, I have to know everything about this.
Last but not least, we have this clip from an interview with Taylor Hudak and pathologist Arne Burkhardt before his passing.
But shortly before his death, I had the chance to interview him in his laboratory in Germany, in which he gave a detailed and compelling account of his work. During the next 2 hours, you will hear Professor Burkhardt once more, in his own words, discuss his findings, his motivation, and what he hoped for the future of the fields of science and medicine. This is one of the few extensive English language interviews with Professor Arne Burkhardt, and it is one of his last. I'm journalist Taylor Hudak, and today I'm in Reutlingen, Germany at the Laboratory of Pathologist Professor Dr. Arne Burkhardt. Professor Burkhardt is a highly esteemed pathologist with more than 50 years experience in the field. Since 2021, he has examined 75 autopsies in patients who died shortly after vaccination, as well as 41 biopsies in living persons to determine if the COVID-19 vaccinations caused either the death or disease in the patient. All right, Professor Arne Burkhardt, it is my pleasure to be here in your lab today and to speak with you. I have been following your work very closely for the past year in particular. So why don't you just introduce yourself to the viewers, explain your credentials, your qualifications, as well as your contributions to the field of pathology.
Well, first of all, of course, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to talk to you and for those people who are interested in this field. Well, as you said, I've been in the field of pathology for many, many years now, and many years also in scientific projects involved. The latest book has appeared in just last year, so I think I'm still in the business, so to say. Actually, beginning of 2021, I wanted to close this laboratory and go into retirement. And just at that moment, the vaccination campaign started in Germany, and it only took 3 months. That was in March 21, that the first reports came to me about serious side effects, and especially cases of people who died in timely connection with the vaccination. And in most of these cases, even if an autopsy was performed, it was stated, well, this was a natural death. And the relatives were suspicious about this, and they didn't accept this because usually these people were very healthy before vaccination. So they contacted me and other pathologists about a second opinion. Now, a second opinion is something very usual in oncology, because to type a certain type of cancer, you have sometimes many pathologists look at it and they have different opinions and so on. But in autopsy, usually the autopsy is considered something like a gold standard. If you do the autopsy and you have a result, you accept it. And maybe only once a year it happened that somebody said, well, there's an autopsy and I don't believe the results, please look at it. But suddenly these were many, many relatives that came to me, and sometimes also attorneys who turned to me and asked if I would be willing to do this, because usually many other pathologists just refused this. And actually I said, well, I can look at 5 or 6 cases, and probably everything is okay and this will be it. But then I received the first 5 cases and I saw things that were very unusual and lesions that I had not seen before in this context. So actually I contacted other pathologists and also university institutes and asked them if they would continue this work and take over my project, because actually I didn't want to do this and go into retirement. But actually some of the pathologists that I contacted first said, well, yes, we do it and we have some support from the government for these projects and we will do it. But after a while, when it should have been started, they drew back and they said, well, we don't want to have anything to do with it. Please leave us alone. So I was forced to continue my work. And as a consequence of our first results, luckily I had a second experienced pathologist, Professor Lang from Hanover, who helped me and who was able to confirm what I saw.
Of course, the initial diagnosis was either death caused by some natural causes or another cause. So how do you account for the discrepancy between your second opinion findings and the initial cause of death?
Well, as you said, there was a discrepancy in almost all of the cases that we saw. The pathologist or the coroner who did the autopsy claimed it was a natural cause of death, or some stated it was unclear. Okay, that's always a very honest diagnosis. The problem is that quality of autopsy, as it is practiced now in Germany, I think has dramatically declined in the last years. When I learned pathology, this was the main focus of the institutes of pathology was autopsy. But now it's mostly bioptic diagnostic, which of course is also very important. But pathologists have lost the interest in autopsy, and usually they are satisfied if they find something plausible as a death. So if they see a discoloration of the heart muscle, well, they say, well, this is an infarction of the heart, and if the person is older than 50 years, I mean, that's always plausible. And so it is, they no longer look for the causes behind what they see. I mean, even in many cases, histology is not done. That means the tissue is not examined in the microscope, and you cannot make a diagnosis without, or not many diagnoses you cannot make without looking at the microscope.
And that's what you did. You used histopathology, is that correct?
Yeah.
And can you explain to us what that is? We will also show these images here to help explain the use of histopathology.
Yes, well, first of all, you take a small specimen from the tissue that you want to examine, and it has to be fixed because it's soft and you cannot cut it, and you have to perform very thin sections, thousands of millimeters thickness, and if you put them on a glass slide so they are fixed, then they don't have any color at all. Only few elements have color, like the red blood cells. That's why they are called red blood cells, but all the other cells do not have any color. So you use special stains to make structures visible. And there are two ways to do this. One is that you have a chemical affinity of the dye, and you see special structures. And the other thing is that you have antibodies that bind to certain proteins that you then see in what we call immunohistochemistry.
Let's focus on this image here. This explains on the left, or it shows rather, unstained prostate gland tissue and kidney tissue, and then on the right we see it labeled as HE stain. Can you just explain why you would use this method when examining a specimen?
Well, actually the H&E stain, which is hematoxylene eosine abbreviation, is a standard coloration or stain used in pathology. Almost all examinations start with the H&E stain.
So it's a very common practice to use this staining method, and does it help you differentiate between the different structures that you were looking at?
Well, at most structures, at least.
I'm just showing these images to the viewers now so they can be prepared for what they are about to see as we begin discussing your own work and the images from your studies. But if we could just take a look here at this next image, this is liver tissue stained with HE. Can you just describe why it is so useful to stain a specimen, again, with HE?
Yes, well, you see the blue points, these are the nuclei, as I said, and they may be enlarged or there may be multiple nuclei in a cell. And then, of course, you see the cytoplasm, which is clearly red here, and you can see there may be changes there too. There may be inclusions, there may be vacuoles, there may be foreign bodies in there. So all this you can see.
In addition to the HE stain, there are also various special staining methods that highlight specific structures and disease-related features. Here we see two examples from Professor Burkhart's findings. In the image on the left, the Congo red stain is used to highlight a ring of amyloid within the vessel, which is a darker red color. In the image on the right, the Prussian blue stain is used to highlight iron deposits in the periphery of the vessel. Later on in this interview, Professor Burkhart will explain what the findings mean. I next asked him whether the pathologists who had performed the initial autopsies had also examined the tissue samples under the microscope.
Those autopsies that were performed in legal institutions, usually no histology at all is done.
Is that unusual to you?
No, this has been practiced since the beginning of legal medicine, actually, and it is upon the prosecutor if he orders histology to be done or not. So, of course, if there's a clear case, like somebody has been stabbed by a knife, I mean, you don't have to have a histology for that. And so the prosecutor says, well, this is okay. But if it is stated unclear, cause of death is unclear, then the prosecutor has to decide whether histology is done or not. But actually, in many cases that I have seen now, even if the coroner said cause of death is unclear, no histology was ordered. In many cases, toxicological examinations were done, especially in young people who die suddenly of unexplained causes. Often drug abuse is suspected. But in all of these cases that we examined, this was negative.
So in your own studies, upon your second opinion, you did use the histopathology, whereas it was not done at the initial diagnosis.
Yes, yes.
So that accounts for the discrepancy in your second opinion compared to the initial diagnosis?
Usually, yes. As I said, in the legal institutions do not histology as a routine work, but they preserve specimens. And these specimens are guarded for 2 or 3 years, and so we got these specimens and we did the histology.
Now I would like to focus on the pathological changes commonly seen in vaccinated persons. And so many of us who are not medical professionals have heard of myocarditis, which is inflammation of the heart muscle tissue. And you were able to observe this in your own studies. So I would like to now discuss these two images here. this shows on the left normal heart muscle tissue and on the right lymphocytic myocarditis after the vaccine. Can you explain to us the observed abnormalities that you see with the image on the right?
Well, on the left side, you see the muscle cells, which are elongated and have these long nuclei. But on the right side, you see that in the middle between these muscle cells, there are small blue dots, which are the nuclei of lymphocytes. Lymphocytes are immunologically active cells, and apparently they have been attracted by some antigenic material that is in the heart. Now, of course, one or two lymphocytes are always seen in a section, but not aggregations like that. You may compare this to the police controlling a city, for example. Now, if you see one policeman or policewoman, that's okay. I mean, that's normal. If you see two, it's still not alarming. But if you all of a sudden you see 50 policemen, then you know there must be some trouble somewhere in the city. And that's the same in the heart muscle. I mean, if I see one or two lymphocytes, that's normal. And they control, so to say, if there's anything wrong. But if they are aggregated like this in clumps, there's something wrong, and that's myocarditis. By the way, a myocarditis, as a consequence of vaccination, of the so-called vaccination, is now internationally recognized. I mean, this is nothing that we have to prove anymore. This has been proven and is a solid scientific standard.
Absolutely. Now, with this particular case that we are referencing here, do you know what symptoms the person had? And if not, what symptoms would you expect one to experience in a case like this?
Well, the main symptom is fatigue and physical deterioration, the necessity to sleep after some sportive activity and physical strain. So actually we had 31 cases among these 75 cases where it was stated they died of heart failure, and normal heart failure like rhythmogenic failure and so on. And of these 31 cases, actually in 15 cases there was a perimyocarditis, inflammation, and in the other 16 we saw what is called a microangiopathy, that is changes in the small vessels that have nothing to do with arteriosclerosis, which of course is normal in older patients. So this is the myocarditis.
Prior to the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccinations, when you look back on your career, how often did you see myocarditis then compared to now within the past 2 years?
I don't think I saw myocarditis more than once a year. And at that time we did between 1,500 and 2,000 autopsies a year. And as I said, 1 or 2 cases a year. And now this is one of the most common diagnoses, especially in younger people.
Professor Burkhardt has explained that clusters of lymphocytes in heart muscle tissue indicate inflammation. A large cluster of lymphocytes is also seen in this sample of lung tissue. The sample is from an 82-year-old woman who died 40 days after receiving a second injection of the Moderna vaccine.
You can see a small vessel, and there's lymphocytic infiltration around it, which is not normally in the lung. And so this person definitely must have had some deficit in the gas exchange of the lung.
We next discuss the case of a 70-year-old woman in whom Professor Burkhardt found striking changes within the thyroid gland. A tissue sample from the woman's thyroid gland is shown on the right. On the left, we see some normal thyroid gland tissue for comparison.
Well, yes, on the left side you see the what we call follicles, which contain the thyroid hormone, and the hormone is, of course, needed for the body. And on the right side you see that these structures are lacking, and instead of these structures there's lymphocytic infiltrations, which we already have seen in the other pictures. So these lymphocytes destroy the thyroid tissue, and this is a well-known autoimmune disease, which is known for many years, and it of course occurs without vaccination. But after this vaccination, we see it more often. And in these people that we saw the autopsies, in many cases this disease was not known before. So it probably started or was at least promoted by the vaccination. We asked about if there were symptoms before. Nobody knew anything about thyroid disease in this person.
So this person did not have any pre-existing condition that could maybe put them at risk for something like this?
No.
Interesting. Okay. Is this damage reversible?
Once the thyroid glands is destroyed, this is not reversible. It does not have the capability of reconstruction. But it can be treated, of course, by giving the hormone medical treatment.
Be sure to click the links on the website for the full clips, especially this last interview from Taylor, which is an in-depth 2-hour-long piece. Hope to see you all next year.